So I stood in front of him and said, Che Guevara, I'd like to talk to you. He looked at me very arrogant and said, nobody talks to me, nobody interrogates me. So when I saw that attitude, I said, Comandante, I didn't come here to interrogate you. I'd like to talk to you. I admire you. You used to be head of a state in Cuba, and you're here because you believe in your ideals, even though I know they are mistaken. He said, can you untie me? Can I sit? I said, sure. Just before that picture was taken, I put my hand around Che and said, Comandante, mira el pajarito, look the little bird. We tell that in Cuba to los niños, no? Look at the little bird, look at el pajarito. So I got into the room, I stood in front of him, he was sitting in the bench, he looked at me, I looked at him. I said, Commander, I'm sorry. I tried my best. It's order from the High Bolivian Command. The guy looked at me and he turned white like a piece of paper. I had never seen somebody whose face turned white. I mean, literally white. Is anything you want for your family? Tell Fidel that he will soon see a triumphant revolution in America. And then he changed and said, and you can tell my wife to remarry and try to be happy.
There's a documentary out there. In that documentary, they accuse you of being tied to the murder of the DEA agent.
Kiki Camarena.
Kiki Camarena, yeah.
Yeah, we've been aware of that.
You smoke cigars?
No.
You don't? Oh man, I brought a Cuban cigar for you.
Never.
I was hoping that
Not even cigarette.
You never ever smoked cigars?
Nope, nor cigarette.
Really?
When I was 5 years old, my father made me smoke one cigarette.
Your dad made you smoke a cigarette when you were 5?
He offered me a cigarette. I didn't want it, and he forced it on me. So I got sick, I vomited, I hated the smoke. I never touched it again.
Wow. That's a good strategy.
It was good he did that. I don't know if he did it for that purpose, but he definitely accomplished that.
So to preface this conversation, I wanted to give some context to how I found out about you. And that was through a guy named Rick Prado, who was on the podcast. He was a former CIA paramilitary guy who was based in Honduras. And another woman who was just on the podcast, Annie Jacobson, who wrote a book called Surprise, Kill, Vanish, all about the paramilitary teams and the assassination, the covert assassination operations that had gone on around the world since the beginning of the Cold War. And you have had a legendary career and life. So first of all, thank you for inviting me here to your beautiful museum packed with history. And for people that are listening who may not know about you, can you give me just like a brief background of your where you come from and your military career?
Yes, I come from a small town, Cuba, called Santi Espiritus, where I spent all my kids' life. I was born in 1941. I went to La Salle school in Santi Espiritus. Then in 1952, when Batista made a military coup, my uncle was made Secretary of Public Work. So he moved to Havana, and my mother accompanied him to be able to set up the home for him. So she took me along with her. So I spent the first years in La Salle school in Havana. Then for the second year, I was in the Havana Military Academy. And then I moved, I used to live in my uncle's home until the next year. Then they offered me to go to the United States if I wanted to come to school here. So in 1954, when I was about 13 years old, I moved to Perkiomen Preparatory School in Pennsburg, Pennsylvania. That's where I started 7th and 8th grade. And then I continued through my 4 years of high school. Now, before I completed the 6 years of high school, and it was in December 1959, my parents had gone to Mexico on vacation in late 58. So I went there to visit them, and I spent New Year's Eve with them, and that's when Castro took over. So I came back to school again. I was supposed to go to Havana, but because of the situation in there, I didn't. Went back to school, and then went back in 1959 to visit my parents in Mexico. And at that time, there was a Captain Cortez from the Cuban Army who was actually recruiting people for the first operation against Castro that took place in the Dominican Republic. It was called the Anti-Communist Legion of the Caribbean. And it was composed of about 100 Cubans, 150 Spaniards, 50 Yugoslavian, 50 Greek, and 50 mixed nationalities. So when I was actually recruited by this guy as a volunteer, My father didn't want to sign me the paper because I was 17 years old at the time. So I told him that I was going to forfeit his signature in front of him, and he agreed. He told me that he will not sign it because he might be signing my death sentence, but he respected my position and go ahead and do it. So in front of him, I did sign my name. I got the visa number 60 from the Dominican Republic, and actually on the 4th of July of 1959, I flew on a plane from Miami to Dominican Republic, an airfield that was in the middle of the city called General Andrew, that no longer exists now. And there I was met by General Pedraza, who was a Cuban general, and taken to his home for a while, spent a week in it was called at the time Ciudad Trujillo. And from there we went to the naval base of Caldera, where we started training in there. I was 18 years old by the time. Then we were training there until they were supposed to be the first attempt to overthrow Castro. Cuban mayor Eloy Gutierrez Minoyo claimed that he had taken over the city of Trinidad and invited the people from the Dominican Republic to support them with weapon and military personnel for training. So people in the Dominican Republic believed him. He was actually working for Castro. We didn't know that. So there was a plane who was supposed to go there with a lot of weapons.
He was working for Castro? You said he was working for Castro?
The mayor who said that he had this defect and he had taken over the city of Trinidad was working for Castro.
Okay, got it. Hey guys, I want to ask you a quick favor. Over the last few months, almost 70% of the viewers of this podcast are not subscribed to the channel. The most important common denominator that allows me to keep creating these podcasts every single week is you hitting that subscribe button below the videos. I want to thank every single one of you who watches and supports these podcasts. I would not be able to do it without you. Please hit that subscribe button if you enjoy it. Now back to the show.
And he double-crossed the people that we were in the Dominican Republic. So they were ready to send a plane with about 5 instructors and plenty of military equipment. I was supposed to go on that plane. So there was 5 of us to go in the plane. One was Mari Brown, who was a Spanish, who was actually in the French Legion. The other 2 were Cuban Lieutenant Rivero and Lieutenant Rodriguez. And there was Roberto Martin Perez, who was the son of a Cuban lieutenant colonel in the police, and myself. But we were ready to go in the helicopter to fly from there to San Isidro Air Force Base in the Dominican Republic. Roberto Martin Perez's father, who was very close to my family, came to the helicopter and said that I was like a son to him, and his son had much experience that I did, so his son will go, I will go with him when he goes. And he got me out of the helicopter. I really didn't talk to him for about a week, and then the helicopter actually landed in San Isidro. They got that C-46 plane that did belong to Batista when Batista left Cuba. And when he landed in Trinidad, I actually was taken by Castro forces. All of them were arrested. The captain that took my place, I wasn't supposed to stay. My mission was to put gasoline in the plane, oil if needed, and come back to the Dominican Republic. What happened then is this guy put a defense on the plane, and he was the only one who was killed on the operation. The other people were captured, and my friend Roberto Martin Perez spent the next 28 years in a Cuban prison. Then after that, they moved our unit to continue training in Constanza. That's an area up in the mountain. When I arrived, there were already guerrillas in there that Cuba had sent with Delio Gomez Ochoa, a commander. And there were Cuban and Dominican people. And of course, it was put down. Most of our people fought them. The Cubans that were there fought against those guerrillas along with the Dominican troops. And they were able to eliminate all of them eventually. So after that, the operation was eventually terminated. I contacted hepatitis. My parents went to Mexico, to Dominican Republic to pick me up. So I flew back to Miami in December of 1959. I recovered in Miami. I missed 1 semester in school. I went back to school. I recovered that semester and did graduated in June of 1960 from high school. I did apply. I was accepted at the University of Miami for engineering, civil engineering. That's what I really wanted to be all my life. Before that happened, we learned there was something going on somewhere in Latin America to liberate our homeland. So I decided that was more important. So I joined that, later became the Bay of Peak Invasion. So we were flowing from the Opalaca airport into Guatemala, and then we started training in Guatemala along with the Brigade 25 of 6. At the time, we had no idea what the CIA was. I thought, we all thought that there were rich Cuban people who have lost sugar mills in Cuba were putting up the money for this operation.
You had no idea what the CIA was.
We had no idea what the CIA was. We had no idea that the U.S. government was sponsoring our operation. It came later on when, everything was...
Who did you think was sponsoring the operation when you decided to go
rich
to
Cuban, a bunch of rich Cubans that had lost a lot of sugar mills and things in Cuba. They had enough money, and they were financing this. So that's what we all thought. Now, we went in there, then, the invasion became later a fiasco. A lot of people ask why was the invasion putting hand with the CIA and not the Pentagon, because the CIA had no expertise in military landing, the Pentagon did. And the simple answer is it wasn't meant to be a military landing. When the Eisenhower administration received information in 1960 from their intelligence sources that the Soviets were planning to bring offensive missiles into the island, they decided to destabilize the Castro regime.
Right.
So they ordered the CIA to destabilize the Castro regime. And what the CIA did was they got a very experienced military guy in guerrilla warfare called, they called with us Napoleon Valeriano.
Is this when Nixon was vice president and Nixon thought he was going to win the election against Kennedy, or when Nixon first, I think Rockefeller dropped out of the race, and then Nixon realized he was going to be the primary candidate in the Republican Party?
Yeah, Nixon was the vice president at the time with Eisenhower. Was already the vice president.
Nixon, yeah, right. So what I was asking, Nixon was the vice president, and then Nixon wanted to establish a paramilitary team to go into Cuba to destabilize Cuba, right?
Well, I think that was the decision of President Eisenhower, not Nixon.
Okay, I must have.
But he was vice president, and by all means, we all know that he did win the election. And the election became fraudulent because the mayor of Chicago, Dealy, was the one who committed fraud in that election, gave the election to President Kennedy. But actually, everybody knows that the election was won by President, the Vice President Nixon. If they had been honorable, Chicago would have gone for Nixon, and that was the state that gave the presidency to either one. So Dealy committed fraud, and that's how Kennedy became president of the United States.
His campaign, the people who were running his presidential campaign, they covertly went to all the preachers, to all the churches in 7 or 8 major swing states, and they turned them from Republican to Democratic and convinced them all to support Kennedy. So that there was these black preachers that were showing all these pamphlets in support of Kennedy in all the churches, and they were able to swing the black vote in 7 states to Kennedy.
I don't know what happened there. I knew that if Dealy had not committed fraud, Nixon would have been president of the United States. The rest, I had no idea that was going on in there. The thing is, then they contracted this guy who was a colonel, graduated from West Point from the Pentagon, whose real name was Napoleon Valeriano. He used the name with also Vallejo. And he had been very effective in the war against the Hawk in the Philippines. And he started training us as a guerrilla warfare. Now, there were guerrillas in the Escambray. So the idea of the Eisenhower administration was reinforce that guerrilla to a point that they will be able to control a small territory and declaring independent territory, and then bring a provisional government from there, and it will be recognized by the OAS and the United States. That was the end of Castro. So we formed what was called the infiltration team or the Great Team, or a special forces of the Brigade. There were 90 of us. Actually, about only 36 of us entered Cuba clandestinely before the invasion. And there were several what was called black team of 25 men each who were specialized in receive weapons by air and by sea and also military training. The idea was that we would go into the country first, start bringing civilians into the Escambray Mountain. Once there were enough people in there, they would bring the black team to train them. And once there was a strong guerrilla that could liberate a small territory, then the rest of the brigade will come protecting a provisional civilian government in arms that was going to promote free and democratic election within a year. And of course, it would be accepted by the OAS, Organization of American States, and 90-some% American troops, maybe a little percent of Latin American troops, and that was the end of Castro. That was the idea of the operation.
And was this the same thing as Operation 40?
No. Operation 40 was a part of the operation of the Bay of Pigs with intelligence people who was going to go in to work the intelligence inside the operation itself. So that was the concept that prevailed. Now, when President Kennedy was elected president, then he had been extremely critical of Nixon, telling him that he was not doing enough to stop communism in Cuba. I had no idea that we were already in Guatemala being trained by the Eisenhower administration. So when he was confronted with the fact that they already had people in there, he decided to continue with the operation, but he didn't want an operation that was actually planned by Republicans. So he decided to continue it, but with a different concept altogether. They disbanded the black teams. They formed what is actually a reinforced battalion, not a brigade, even though they call it a brigade. They took our Filipino colonel out of the operational area. They brought a guy from the Pentagon. And they kept us, the infiltration team. We went additional training after December, late part of December. We moved to Panama for additional special training. And from there in January, we started moving to Miami and infiltrating Cuba in different form. There was a group that landed in Cuba by the airport, in the international airport, with their true name. And the cover story was they were coming back from American University to support the revolution. One team parachuted into the island, the Camagüey area. 90% of the team entered through navally, through the infiltration through the coast with reception team. And one individual entered through the Guantanamo naval base, held by the base and approved by the chief of operation of naval operation in there. And that was the people that were inside Cuba. So I entered Cuba in late February of 1961 to work with the internal resistance. Now, while we were operating inside Cuba, we were never told of the invasion coming in at all. We were not privy of that. When they decided to invade, we had no idea it was taking place. We had enough explosives.
Talking about the Bay of Pigs invasion.
We had enough explosive inside the island and enough weapons to be able to blow breaches on the way to the Bay of Pigs and delay the troops coming in, but we were never advised. By the time we learned that the invasion had taken place and where, Fidel already had thousands of people being arrested. He got all his army going house by house in the main cities of Cuba, especially in Havana. They surrounded every building, and if you were a male in age of a military age, and you were not assigned to a military unit, even though you have done nothing. Maybe you were even registered in the Communist Party. But if you were not assigned to a military unit, they will pick you up and they put up in temporary concentration camps, like I could call. They had baseball field with high fences. They were housing 250,000 Cubans from Havana. There was like Hotel Blanquita, called now Carlos Marx, who has capacity for 5,000 people. It was housing like 5,500 people in there. So it was really a disaster. They actually were able to disarticulate internal resistance because most of them were captured. Even though later on, after everything passed, all of them were liberated because they had no idea who they had. But at the same time, they were able to disarticulate the internal resistance, so we could not help the invasion at all. So when it failed, a lot of our people were, like say, members of my infiltration team. 4 of them were executed by firing a squad. One of them was captured defending a safe house. He was also executed. Then they had 5 people from Castro's 26th of July who landed. He had a personal grudge against them. They were, after being captured, they were executed by firing a squad. And there were others that would die, they drowned, all of the others died in training. Like, for example, our 25-06 member, Carlos Rodriguez Santana, he was the first casualty in Guatemala. He fell from a mountain trying to locate a better place for training, and he was the first casualty, and his brigade number was 2506. That's why they call Assault Brigade 2506 in his honor, being the first one that was, who was killed. The brigade fought bravely the 3 days that they could. They had weapons for only 24 hours. The boat that was sank because we did not control the air. We were promised the air support. There were 2 air strikes that destroyed 90% of Castro Air Force, but there was a last strike that was supposed to take place with 16 planes that was canceled by Adlai Stevenson. And the situation was that Stevenson wasn't briefed on the operation. He was told that this operation, all the planes that were attacking Cuban targets were Cuban defector planes. And that's what he really believed. And when the first attack, they shot down one of our planes, and Cuban ambassador Raul Roa could present in the United Nations a picture of the B-26 that Cuba had, that had a plastic nose. And then the picture of the plane that were attacking us because they had one down. They had the 850 caliber machine gun in the nose, completely different planes. Then Adlai Stevenson told the administration unless they put a stop to the airstrike, he will resign to the UN. So they put a stop to the final airstrike, who was really going to eliminate all of Castro's Air Force to convince Stevenson not to resign. And that was the turning point where we did not control the air. They sank the boat with all the ammunition, every supply that we had, and there was no contingency plan. So the brigade flew bravely for 24 hours. The ammunition we had extended to 72 hours, for 48 hours. When it got to 72 hours, they ran out of ammunition, and they did not surrender, but they had to go into the swamp, and most of them were captured.
So during the invasion, right, when you guys were initiating the invasion for the first 24 hours during the Bay of Pigs, did you guys know there wasn't going to be any air support? Or did you guys think that you had air support coming?
We went in Havana, we believed we were going to have air support. And it did take place, the first two airstrikes before the invasion. Now, the third one, who was the most important one, we had no idea it had been canceled because of the Adlai Stevenson. And that was critical. That was the airstrike was going to take out the T-33 jet trainers and the 86 planes. When they didn't take out that, they were the one who controlled the air. On the first day when the invasion landed, they were able to sink the boat, the Houston, who was bringing all the weapons and ammunition, everything. And there was not a contingency plan by the administration at all. So where people fought bravely for the first 48 hours, they took every single position on the first day that were assigned to them. But then when they ran out of ammunition, they did not surrender, but they had to get into the jungles. And then weeks later, leader by leader, they actually captured over 95% of the brigade.
How many people total?
Oh, they were together landed about 1,200 of them, less than 1,300. Over 1,100 were captured. There were also, actually, who died in combat was about 76, not more than that. And the rest of the people we count like 100 and some people that died. The rest of people there were a boat called Celia who was able to leave with 22 brigade members on board. Now, we had in front of the Bay of Pigs during the invasion Task Force Alpha from the Navy. We have the USS Carrier in front of us. Essex, by the name of the Essex, they have all the plane painted black. It was supposed to participate. We have several Marine landing craft on board. They have several destroyers. They had 2 submarines, the whole task force. But it was never authorized by the president to participate in it. So as soon as the invasion failed, they pick up a few people and they left. Mm-hmm. So this group, they were able to steal a larger boat, and 22 of the Cuban brigade members were able to get on it. And they actually drifted all the way through the south coast into the north coast. And they also were picked up 2 weeks later near New Orleans. By that time, 10 of them had died from thirst and lack of water.
Who?
And 10 brigade members died
10
during that situation, and 12 survived. Then there were also, like I said, the 5 people that were executed from the infiltration team, the 5 people that he executed from Fidel's personal unit. There were several of them who died in the hospital with lack of medical attention. There are others that died in training before they arrived in there. But the actual toll of the brigade was minimal compared to their losses. Right. In the Bay of Pigs itself, they lost over 100 people. But then there was what we call La Carretera de la Muerte, the death road, where he was coming on the second day with 80,000 militia. And there were 3 of our B-26 planes that engaged them. Now, every plane had 5 inches rocket each. It had 850 caliber machine gun in the nose, and each one of them will carry a 500-pound bomb of napalm bomb. Wow. And they went through over that column of Castro's troops, and the result was between 4,000 to 5,000 casualties between dead and killed. Castro never talked about that. Now, we had a paramedic guy who eventually defected, came to the United States. He wrote a book about it, and he made it available to us. He was at the other end receiving the wounded and the dead. And he's the one who told us that the result was, well, he would say it was over 5,000 people that were wounded and killed. and they had to send it to different hospital out of the city. They have to use a basketball field to put the wounded and the dead in there because they have no way to be able to deal with so many wounded and dead people. Fidel never count those people that who die during the Bay of Pigs. He only commemorate 100 and some of them.
So how long, you said it took about 24 hours until you ran out of ammunition?
48 hours.
48 hours. So walk me through what was going, how old were you?
19.
So you're 19 years old, you just invaded Cuba, and it's been 48 hours, you run out of ammunition, you have no backup air support.
Remember, I was in Havana working with the resistance. I was not at the Bay of Pigs.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're in advance.
Yeah, I entered in Cuba a month and a half before the invasion to work with the resistance inside.
Okay.
That's what I said. They never advised us. They never told us of the invasion. Otherwise, we had enough equipment to be able to blow bridges on the way to Playa Girón. It could delay the troops going in there. But when they told, it was too late. Fidel was already picking up thousands of people in the cities, and there was no longer safe house that will give you safe passage.
So you were no longer safe?
No.
What did you do at that moment?
Well, I was lucky that the lady who was driving me around had contact with the Spanish embassy. So here come Alejandro Vergara with it was actually, his title was Press and Propaganda for the Spanish embassy in Havana, but he was the intelligence officer for the Spanish government in there. He knew her, who was of Spanish origin, and he came to pick her up to save her at the apartment that we were. They were coming to be checking within the next few minutes. So I went with them. So we got into his car, and as we were pulling out, there was a truck with militia surrounding the building where we were. So we went to his apartment at the Edificio Someyan. Of course, he had diplomatic immunity, and there were already 8 people hiding in his apartment, sleeping in the floor. So that's where I stayed there for a while, and it was an amazing situation because his apartment was in 2B, and my grandparents were in 1A of the same building. So from his apartment, I could see my grandfather and my grandmother on my father's side having breakfast downstairs. So I tried to contact different safe houses to move because he told me I couldn't stay there too long, and nobody will answer you. Everybody was afraid. Even if they answer you, they will not accept you. Before people had they knew or they thought we were going to win, so they didn't mind taking chances of being picked up because they knew we were going to be out soon after the invasion. But after the invasion failed, nobody will give us any support at all in Havana. So I was lucky then that this lady was friends with this guy Vergara, and I spent about a week in his apartment, and then eventually they took me to the Venezuelan embassy where I did seek political asylum. Wow. So this Venezuelan embassy where I lived, it was a big house from one of the rich people of Cuba, Mestre, who owned the CMQ television station in Cuba. And it was a huge house for a big family, but not to be able to lodge 120 people in there. So we were 120 people living in one home. I had a big jar. Can you imagine? There were fights after a while. We had to make crews to cook and to clean the house. And, I slept in a room with 20-some people in the dining room on top of chairs. It was really not easy. And I had to spend there 5.5 months before they finally were able to seek political asylum papers to be able to leave the country.
Was this guy not concerned? Was he not worried at all about harboring you guys in his house?
No, there is a treaty that is signed by all Latin American countries in general, with the exception of the United States, Canada, and Dominican Republic. Trujillo never signed that treaty. If you are a national you have to be a national from that country, specifically that you are asking for political asylum. If you are being persecuted politically and you can prove that, they will give you political asylum protection. And the government is compelled to give you a safe conduct out of the country in a reasonable time. Now, the Cuban interpreted reasonable time any way they want it. It's supposed to be a few days, maybe a week. In my case, they hold it for close to 5.5 months before they will allow me to leave. I had to leave there. Then eventually they give you a safe conduct to leave the country. So on the 13th of September of 1961, that's when I left from the Venezuelan embassy in a plane with another 100 and some people to Caracas, Venezuela. And then I stayed in Caracas for about a week. I did have contact with the agency in there. They provided money for my ticket. My mother, while I was in the embassy, was able to send my Cuban passport, who had a student visa on it. So I used that student passport with visa to be able to get into the United States at the very end of the month of September. Now, the main thing is they contacted me again, and before the October month was over, I already was going back to Cuba. Only for intelligence purposes. I made 7 trips to Cuba after the Bay of Pigs, bringing people, material in and out during that time.
And you were doing this by boat or plane?
By boat. No, it was all by boat.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Mudwater. Mudwater is a coffee alternative containing 4 adaptogenic mushrooms. With only a fraction of the caffeine as a cup of coffee, you get energy without the jitters or the crash of coffee. And each ingredient was added for a purpose. Cacao and chai for a hint of caffeine and hot chocolate-like flavor, lion's mane to support focus, cordyceps to help support physical performance, and both chaga and reishi to support your immune system. What I really love about Mudwater is that it tastes great, and they took their time to find all the perfect ingredients to develop a product that helps you feel better every single day. Mudwater donates monthly to psychedelic research and treatments as they believe the country is in a mental health epidemic and sees psychedelics as useful tools for individuals with depression, PTSD, anxiety, and other mental health experiences. So get 15% off and a free frother by using my link below, mudwater.com/Danny, and use the code Danny at checkout to get 15% off. That's mudwtr.com/Danny, and use the promo code Danny at checkout to get 15% off. It's linked below. Now back to the show. So after you got into Caracas, after you escaped Cuba, did the CIA contact you at all? Did you contact them? What was the communication?
I found out a way to contact them. One guy who worked at the Maiquetía airport, who was in contact with the agency. And I contacted him, explained my situation. He was the one who provided the ticket and everything, arranged for everything for me to fly out of Caracas for Miami. So when we landed here, the normal procedure was they will pick us up and take off to Apalaca for debrief for about 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
It's sad because I lost they should have given back to me, but they kept my Cuban passport. They never gave it back to me. Then after that, of course, the agency already knew that I was there, and they were part of the debriefing. So from there, I continued to work with them back and forth. And I worked with the agency like that. I actually shook the hand of President Kennedy when he visited the Orange Bowl at the end of 1960.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That's when the Brigade gave him the flag, allegedly that was at the Bay of Pigs. The Kennedy accepted the flag in custody, and he promised that day that he will soon return the flag in a free Havana. He meant it. I honestly believe that he meant it, and I believe that's why he was assassinated in Dallas. He darn well knew that if he didn't assassinate Castro, he didn't assassinate Kennedy, Kennedy was going to assassinate him. And it was true. The president was planning the assassination of Castro after that, for sure.
Wait, say that one more time?
Fidel Castro knew if he didn't assassinate Kennedy, Kennedy was going to assassinate him.
Oh, got it. Okay.
It was a matter of, he knew that. And that's why I'm convinced he was part of the assassination of the president in Dallas. We know that there was a Cuban captain, Fabian Escalante, who was a perfect shooter and a sharpshooter. He spoke fluent English. And we all knew that he was in Dallas that day. Then he was the second shooter. And then he left for Mexico and from there to Cuba on private planes.
So you don't think it was Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone?
No, I think Harvey Oswald was one of the shooters, but I am convinced that this guy, Fabian Escalante, was the second one. That's the famous bullet that is impossible to be able to trace because it was another shooter. Now, at that time, the Johnson administration knew, and they had information from the Bureau of the participation of the Cuban in the assassination of the president. But for national security consideration, they had to cover that up because if they had to recognize at that point in time that the president of a foreign government like Cuba assassinated the president of the United States, they had to invade Cuba. And they knew there were already inside Cuba 4 offensive missiles. Cuba was able to sneak in 4 offensive nuclear missiles into the island. I guess that's why when Khrushchev knew that they had been able to put in 4 offensive missiles, that's when he decided openly to bring those both full of nuclear. That was the October crisis took place.
Cuban Missile Crisis. What did you think? What was your opinion of President Kennedy?
I thought there is a different opinion from brigade members. A friend of mine here, he believes he's a traitor. He hates him. In my opinion, I believe he was a young president, inexperienced and very ill-advised. And we had to pay the price. There's no question about it. And he was responsible for it, and like he took full responsibility.
Right.
But then I believe he tried to amend it, and that got his life. Actually, he and his brother wanted to eliminate Castro at all costs. It was something that they could not help it.
I mean, that was one of the major things he ran on during his presidential campaign against Nixon.
No, and he meant it. See, the fact that what he did after that, he opened the Armed Forces of the United States for the brigade officer. So there were 212 brigade officers, I was one of them, who joined the U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines in Fort Benning, Georgia, for basic training. And then also opened the Armed Forces of the United States for regular soldiers, for Cubans to join the Army, not only in Fort Jackson and all the military bases. There were thousands of Cubans who joined that. They were called Unidades Cubanas, Cuban units. We were training for, like I say, in Fort Benning as second lieutenant, 212 of us. And then he started organizing the assassination of the president. We actually graduated after 8 months from the training they gave us was called a Special Officer Training Program. They had to call it that because we were already second lieutenant, but the block of training was based on the OCS, Officer Candidate School, that they give to sergeant, which are going to be promoted to second lieutenant. But they couldn't call it OCS because we were already officers. So they used the same block of training, but call it SOTP, a Special Officer Training Program. So when I graduated from that program in late, I think it was like October or November, before November, it was in September or October, we graduated from the program. I was supposed to go to Fort Harbor in Virginia to take intelligence training. But before that, our team came to visit me in Fort Benning, and they asked me to resign my commission and to join him in a special operation that was sponsored by President Kennedy to eliminate Castro.
Right.
And then he told me, this time we are going to be the one in charge. We are going to be commanding this special operation. Either we win or we lose on our own. They are going to give us everything that we need. All right. And last time we trusted the Americans. We did not participate in any planning of the operation. This one, we were going to do all the planning. He wanted me to resign to be his head of communication. I told him, I said, Manolo, what guarantee do I have that President Kennedy is behind this? He said, what guarantee do you want? I said, well, you want me to leave the Army and go to a motel and be trained by the CIA in communication, tell your source or whoever it is with the administration, I want to be trained in Fort Benning in full uniform of the U.S. Army, being paid by the U.S. Army. If they do that, then I'll resign my commission and go with you. So he told me, fine, go and see your supervisor and ask him you want to take a special communication training. So here I go and see Major Angel Torres, who was a Puerto Rican in charge of our training of all the Cubans.
What was his name again?
Angel Torres.
Angel Torres.
So I went to him and say, Major, Lieutenant Rodriguez, I'd like to change to a special communication training. So he looked at me in his office and said, look, Lieutenant, first of all, as far as I know, there is no such thing as special communication training. Second, if it were, it's too late to change. You are going to Fort Harbor in Virginia for the intelligence training. And third, who told you? Sir, I cannot tell you. He threw me out of his office, which was normal. So we left Fort Benning. We went to Miami for vacation before we went back to Fort Benning to pick up our things to continue on to intelligence training I was supposed to go. When I received a call from Aurora Street, which is the recruiting center in Coral Gables, to ask me to call Major Torres immediately. So I called Major Torres in Fort Benning, and the first thing that he told me is, say, Lieutenant Rodriguez, come to Fort Benning immediately. We have here Mr. Moose and Mr. Flanagan to give you your special communication training. So I enlisted two other members from the brigade, Luis Sierra and Jorge Giraud, to go with me. We all went back to Fort Benning. We were given an empty building inside the military base, and they got these two guys, Mr. Musa, Mr. Flanagan, from the CIA in civilian clothes, who gave us a month and a half of communication training, and they assigned to us a sergeant from Puerto Rico origin, whose last name, by the way, was Castro, to do the translating. Because I did not speak English because I went to school here, but the other two didn't. So we had this guy Castro to do the translation for us. And after we finished the training, we did resign to our officer commission, and we went with our team to Central America. He had enlisted the president of Costa Rica and the president of Nicaragua, Somoza and Chico Orlich from Costa Rica. And we had like 3 bases in Nicaragua. One was a naval base, a commando base, and infiltration team base, and guerrilla base. Then in Costa Rica, we had a communication training base and infiltration team base, both with the full support of both presidents. And we started training and the operating of that operation. Then, unfortunately, President Kennedy was assassinated.
When you were down there?
Then, because of the respect that they still have for Bobby Kennedy was our direct contact with the CIA. Our team had dealt directly with Bobby Kennedy, and Bobby Kennedy was the guy who contacted the CIA on our behalf. We received, for example, all the weapons we received down there came in a huge barrage that was towed all the way from Hamburg, Germany, a U.S. military base, army base. And it was given to us in the ocean. We had M16. The M16 was experimental at that time. The U.S. Army was still using the M1 Garand. We were given the M16, the original one. We were the one who told the agency that this thing, whenever got stuck in mud, didn't work. It was not that the AK-47 was much better. This thing got stuck whenever it got in mud. That's why they then added up that plunger on the right side that you push it in when that happened.
Oh, okay.
If you get in mud, they will push it forward and then it will just continue to operate.
Right.
But we were the one who told them about that defective that the M16 had.
Oh, wow.
We had 20 caliber machine gun that we were using. We had a huge 200 and some boat as a mother boat. We had 2 Swift boats that were normally used in Vietnam. That came out from being built in New Orleans. We had B-20 boat, and we have all kind of armament, from 30 caliber machine gun, 50 caliber machine gun, 20 millimeter machine gun. I mean, anything that we needed, plenty of explosive and everything. We started an operation doing raids against Cuba during that time. Now in 1965, that was as far as Johnson put up with us, and at that point in time, he completely terminated our operation. They sent an assistant to President Kennedy, who was his assistant, whose name was Joseph B. Califano Jr. And he came to visit the people in the army, and they told them on behalf of the president that the promise of President Kennedy to liberate Cuba died with President Kennedy. And there was no longer a commitment from the United States president to liberate Cuba. If you wanted to stay and make a career in the armed forces, you're welcome to it. But be knowing there is no longer a compromise to liberate Cuba. So some of our people left it. They went to civilian life, and some continued in the military career. A lot of them became later on and retired as full colonels, lieutenant colonels. One of them, Oliva, who was deputy commander of the brigade, rose to the rank of brigadier general in the Washington National Guard. Upon his retirement, he got his second star, so he retired as a major general from the U.S. Army. And most of our people, maybe 10 or 15 officers, retired as full colonels, lieutenant colonels, majors, and some captains. We have 3 brigade member captains who died fighting in Vietnam. And we have their picture, their picture here, and the picture of all the people who participated in the armed forces at that time. So that was really a disaster, unfortunately. Then after that failure, I came back to Miami. I have met my wife in Cuba when I was 15 years old and she was 18. First time I saw her, I told myself she's going to be my wife.
Really?
Yes. I was stunned when I saw my wife. And she was 3 years older than I was when I was 15. So when I infiltrated into Cuba, I exchanged letters with her when she was going to Virginia Intermont in college in the United States, maybe 3 or 4 letters. Then when I infiltrated Cuba, I went to visit her at her home in Havana, but she wasn't home. She was in Cienfuegos, where she is from. So when she came back, it was in early 1962, I went to visit her, and within 6 months, we were married.
Wow.
So we got married on May 25th. She's still my present wife. We still have, we are going to our 63rd years of marriage.
That's impressive.
We have 62 already. When I got married to her, I told her I was going to leave the agency and everything. I was going to make a civilian life with her, but I want her to understand if there was something serious about liberating Cuba that I will go.
What did she think about that?
Well, she made the mistake of accepting to that. She agreed to it.
She did.
So this is what happened. Here we are. We got married 25th of August. I started working at a company called Ace Letter Service, $1 an hour. They were company that did propaganda for the whole hotel in Miami Beach, which only opened about 4 months of the year during winter only. The rest of the year, the hotel in Miami Beach were closed. And then from there, my uncle was able to get me a better job in a company called Tobin Packaging Company that had to do with meats and ham and things like that. I was making, instead of $1.35 an hour. Now, while I am working in Tobin Packaging Company, I received a call in October from Tom Klein, who was one of my case officers from the CIA, and he asked me, he wanted to meet me when I finished my work at the parking lot of the Howard and Johnson across from the University of Miami. So I arrived a little bit after 5 o'clock in the afternoon in my little car. He had his big car in there. I sat in his car, and he looked at me very serious. He said, Felix, the Marines are going to land in Cuba, and we need you. I look at him and say, Tom, if the Marines are going to land in Cuba, what the hell do you need me for?
Right.
He said, well, you know how to operate a radio beacon. That's a signal you can set up somewhere to be able to direct plane to a specific location. They will get to that beacon, and then whatever target, it will be very close to there. It will be very easy for the plane to hit the base with precision. So he told me, I'll allow you to parachute behind a Soviet missile base near Santa Clara area, and then set up this radio beacon, a pre-located determined position we will give you, so that our Air Force will hit with precision the air base.
Right.
So I agree. I could not even call my wife. She waited for 3 hours in downtown for me to pick her up. She finally got a bus to our apartment. I was put in a safe house and asked for 2 other friends of mine who come to be 3 of us in the team. My only basic training was they put an instructor in parachute, and what they did, they had different table of different altitude, which will jump from those and the 3 point of contact, so we didn't break a leg. So we practiced that.
High altitude, low.
Yeah, well, one table will be this low, and then will be much, much, much higher.
Oh, okay.
Close to that high in there. Okay, close to that thing up there. Then you have to jump and do the 3 point of contact. You don't break a leg. So we did practice that during the time that we were there.
How high do you jump? How high is the plane flying when you jump out?
It would probably be about 600 feet. You don't even carry a emergency parachute.
And you only deploy that high?
No. They want me to when you are coming down the parachute, you're coming real fast.
Right.
Okay, so when you jump from that altitude, it's about as fast as you're coming down with your parachute on. So unless you are a professional, you can do like this, and then let it go, and you can, people that actually walk, that's for professional.
Right.
When you're coming down with a paratrooper without doing that, you come at that speed. If you jump from there, it will be the same speed you were coming down with a parachute on. So you have to be able to have the 3 point of contact so you don't break your legs.
Right, okay.
And that's what we practice in there.
Wow.
But then Khrushchev back down the day that the plane was coming to take us to parachute into Cuba. The operation was terminated, so I was no longer working with I lost my job at Tobin Packaging Company, so I continued to work with the agency. And then from there, that's when we joined after their operation.
What do you do? What do you continue to do for the agency for work? Like what?
No. After that, so that's when we went into the army.
The army. Okay.
Yeah. After I was out, and in '66, I went to Venezuela with a special communication team to set up a communication system for the CIFA, Servicio Información Fuerzas Armadas. It was an intelligence server from the Venezuelan army, and also helped them in communication gear that they had problem with in the jungle. When their special unit called the Cazadores was fighting the Cuban guerrillas in there. That's when Captain Ochoa, who later was executed as a colonel in Cuba, he was the one who was handling the guerrillas in Venezuela with Cubans and Venezuelans. Then I came back to the United States again. Then in 1968, they sent me, at the beginning, they sent me to Peru. They sent me first to Ecuador, which we trained an intelligence unit for the presidency of Ecuador at that time. At that time, I had the rank of captain as a U.S. Army captain with another name attached to the U.S. Embassy there. Then from there, they sent me to Peru, was a paratrooper unit called the 48 Comandancia Guardia Civil. There's only 2 paratrooper units in police unit in the world. I think one is in Peru, called Los Sinchis, and the other one is in Canada. The only police unit that have paratrooper capability. So I went there. The special forces already left when I arrived. They already trained them in how to rig in the parachute and everything. And I became an advisor to that unit. I recall when I first arrived, the commander of the unit, Danilo Agramonte, he asked me if I was a paratrooper. And out of embarrassment, I say, yes, sir. He said, how many jump? I said, 100. I never jumped from a plane. But I was embarrassed to tell him I was his advisor, and I was not a paratrooper. So he asked me if I would jump with them that afternoon, Sunday. I said, yes, of course. So I called a friend of mine whose name was Javier de Vincenzi and say, how the hell do you put this thing on? I say, you have never jumped? I say, no. You're not. You're going to get killed. I say, bullshit. I practiced already, the 3 point of contact, like do that. So I went to my room. Then we went to the dining room in my pushing there, and we practiced jumping from different altitude. So I jumped with them 13 times. I got my wing from the Peruvian Air Force for Guardia Civil. Now, I was supposed to be there 2 years, but within several months, there was the military coup of Velasco Alvarado against constitutional president Belaúnde Terry. And actually, our unit was not in agreement with the military coup. The commander of the unit called for us. He asked for a plane for training, and he gathered all of us. And the idea was that we were going to take over the plane with full military gear and force the pilot to drop us on top of the presidential palace to regain the control of the presidency for the constitutional president Belaúnde Terry. But the Army never released the Air Force plane that was assigned to us to do some training. At the end, about noontime, about 12 o'clock at night, the director of the police, General Barrios, he knew that they had consolidated the military coup, so he agreed, he went along with. So the army that was surrounding us from the Peruvian army, they just went back. So when we came to this country for vacation, they terminated actually our participation in there because Velasco Alvarado started buying all the equipment from the Soviet Union and went completely to the other side. Mm-hmm. So they stopped the military assistance to Peru. Then in late '69, I volunteered to go to Vietnam. They had a meeting with the chief of station from Venezuela who wanted me to go there and be an advisor to a 10,000 police unit. And then they called me and said, look, both people want you. For you to select. Tom Polgari in Venezuela wants you to go there to an advisor to this police unit, and Ted Shackley in Vietnam wants you to go to Vietnam. I say, well, if you believe I will do better in Venezuela, I will go there. But if the same to you, I'd rather go to Vietnam because I've never been in that part of the world. So they were glad to give it to me. Not many people were volunteering to go to Vietnam at that time.
When did you meet Billy Waugh?
No, it was later on in training.
Much later, okay.
Yeah. In bases here.
Oh, okay.
We never coincided in the field.
Oh, okay.
So that's when I bought my home in late 1969 because I didn't want to leave my wife, in a rented place. That we bought a house. We still have between Miami Shore and North Miami. And then I went to Vietnam in early 1970. I spent in Vietnam from 1970, 71, and 72, 2.5 years. Now, the agency tour is a year and a half, which I completed and then extended for another tour. When I first arrived, I was assigned to Military Region 3. Vietnam is divided in 4 military regions. The I Corps that they call Military Region 1, that's where Da Nang is, that's close to the North Vietnamese border. The second one next to it is Nha Trang, the second military region. And guess the most important one is the one that I was, the third military region, or 3 Corps, which is 11 provinces around Saigon. And then they call the fourth military region, which is where you have Canto, that's what you have, the Delta, the Delta area with the swamps. And then they call Saigon Region 5. It's not a region, it's only a city. But they used to call it Saigon Region 5, which is not a region at all. Mm-hmm. But we were the ones surrounding and responsible for Saigon with 11 military units around it. The PRU was called a Provincial Reconnaissance Unit. It started with another name many years ago. And then they changed for Provincial Reconnaissance Unit. It was military unit that it was totally paid and controlled by the CIA with our intelligence to conduct operations against the Viet Cong in the different areas that we were. We had PRU in all 4 military regions. Now, I commanded the military region of Region 3 and the one from Region 4 from Canto in that area. We had to advise them. The biggest unit was the one in Taining with about 180 PRU. The smallest one was one of the rooms with about 60 people. We have different units, different sites, which we paid, we advised, and we tasked them with intelligence, beside the one that they generated themselves. Now, my main objective or really challenge was to stop, they asked me to stop the rocketing of Saigon and stop the rocketing of the boat coming into Saigon. At the time that I arrived, every single week of the month, there was one or two 122 round Soviet rocket who would land in the Saigon area. They always tried to point to the American embassy and to the presidential palace, but they hardly ever hit it.
Right.
But it was a psychological operation to be able to say that United States with 500,000 troops in country could not stop the rocketing of Saigon. So it was a challenge for the government to do that. And also they were having boats coming through the river all the way to the city of Saigon, and they were always attacked on the side by other units from the Viet Cong called Sapper. Sapper is like our special forces in the Viet Cong. And they could not stop it. They would have always an escort from Navy SeaWorld gunships coming into the river, and they saw the explosion, they shot the hell out of the area, and they never got anybody. So that was one of my main ideas, my main target that it was given to me, challenge to be able to stop the rocketing of Saigon and the rocketing of the boat coming into Saigon, besides other operations that I conducted throughout the region.
So were you riding around in helicopters looking for?
Yeah, what I did, I implemented, the Army had a concept called pink teams. What they did, they had a huge 500 helicopter flying at treetop level with no intelligence in general area where they knew the Viet Cong were. Whenever they took fire from the enemy or they saw the enemy, they would drop a smoke grenade and they would be gunships shooting the hell out of the area. And then they continued to another area. What I did, I took that type of a concept and implemented. First of all, I went with intelligence. They didn't go like they did. When I was going to an area, I knew they were going to be there. And then I did the same thing. I went with the huge 500 T-top level and found them or took fire from them, marked it. Then the gunship will hit it. Then I come back again, and then we bring troops. But they never did. We bring troops into the area to pick up the result with dead people or weapons or whatever documents. We picked it up. We added that to the concept. It's what called Operaciones Relámpago, rayos, lighting operation.
For years, society has been shoving dumbass, bulky George Costanza wallets down our throats, carrying around old receipts and gift cards from 1999. Exter is known for inventing the first trackable wallet, and now they're on a mission to upgrade the rest of your carry essentials. Exter makes sleek, sexy, and sustainable wallets, bags, and accessories to help you get the most out of your day. I use the Exter Parliament wallet, which carries 12 cards plus my cash. Plus, it blocks wireless theft using FRID technology. Exter is simply the best when it comes to wallets because they're modern, slim, sleek, and they won't make you look like you're smuggling plums when you're walking down the street. And best of all, you can track your wallet at any time using GPS, meaning you have zero excuses to ever lose your wallet again. They have backpacks, cash clips, key cases, and much, much more. Use my code DJP when you go to partner.exter.com/Danny Jones for an additional 5% off their current 20% program for their anniversary sale for a total of 25% off your purchase today. That's partner.exter.com/Danny Jones. It's linked below. Now back to the show.
So we started operating in that. Now I was lucky as hell to be able to stop the rocketing of Saigon. The thing is, we never look at the right place. There was an area where they were staying, and we never went there. Why? Because the water tide will come down like 15 feet high. Nobody will be able to be and live with 15 feet high of water coming up and down. So I was able to capture in the operation, I don't know what he was going out of that area, a Kwok, who was the bodyguard of Tu Tang. Tu Tang was the commander of that specific unit who was attacking the Saigon. Mm-hmm. He was lieutenant colonel in the Viet Cong area. And then this guy, he was very pissed off at them because he was the only male in his family. What the North Vietnamese did when they were losing Viet Cong in the south, they would replace them with North Vietnamese army soldiers. Mm-hmm. That's why it would never end, because if you lose 10 people here, there's thousands of people coming through the Ho Chi Minh Trail with different capacities, and they have contact through all Vietnam with different military units of the Viet Cong inside. Say, hey, we need 10 guys, we need 5, we need 15, and they will be refurnished. So you kill 10, and in the next 10, 20 days, you have another 10 taking those people's place. Mm-hmm. It was a never-ending situation. So when I arrived, there were Viet Cong. When I left, there were no Viet Cong. There was all North Vietnamese army on those Viet Cong positions.
Wow.
So this guy told us and said, look, I was the only, normally what they do, there are big families, Vietnamese families. They go to a home in North Vietnam, and if there are maybe 5 males, they take 4, and they always leave 1 to be able to attend to the family. This guy was the only son. They got like 5 sisters. And because they needed him, he was a paramedic in the Ha Bac province around Hanoi. They took him. So he was mad because they left his mother and his sister with nobody to help them. He was not very happy with what he was doing. So he was extremely cooperative. And then through an interpreter, he told me, say, you are looking at the wrong place. This is the area where they are. I say, how come? The 17 foot of water come up? I said, well, they have 55-gallon drum, one on top of the other that they solder, high enough that the water won't get to them. When the water start coming up, they go on top of that on the trees, and they sit there.
What?
And then they live there. Then when the water comes down all the way, they will run down. They take the 122 millimeter rockets. They go over the river. They shoot into Saigon. They went right back and go up in this 5-gallon drum truck up there, and they live there. Whoa. So imagine with that information, plus he gave us the general area where the areas were. We worked with him in the helicopter, and of course we waited until the tide went down all the way, and then we go in the helicopter, at treetop level. They were running around, and because it was mud, you can see his feet going different. So it was very easy to find them. So we started eliminating them, and then on the 4th of December of 1970, we had a big combat with Tu Tang himself and his main group near a small river in there. And we were able to kill like 17 of them, including Tu Tang, including the commander. I recall because we went down there that we had people badly wounded. I went in with one of the helicopters, and I recommended the pilot. His name was Bruce Bomberger. He was a warrant officer from the Army. For a decoration, he received a medal for that. Because that guy landed under heavy fire, and he would not move until we bring these 3 bodies into the heli. I pick up 1, 2 other of my Vietnamese pick up the other 3. We brought all 3 into the helicopter, thinking they were wounded. By the time we arrived to the 34 evacuation helicopter, they were all dead.
They were all dead.
They were all dead. But we were able to disarticulate that. From that day on, there was not a single rocket to hit Saigon until after I left.
Wow.
We had to continue because they continued to bring people. They didn't give up. They continued to bring rocket, bring personnel, and we continued to eliminate them. And then I picked up a sapper, one of the special units was doing the rocketing of the boat in Saigon and going up to Saigon. And I found out that in his backpack he got a green electrical wire. It's about 60 meters long. And then we interrogated the guy, and another thing, we had an advantage. A lot of our PRU were former Viet Cong that we had recruited.
Oh, really?
And they were also compromised to a point that we trusted this guy more than the normal guy from the street, because he knew they double-crossed them, and they knew he would never be able to go back. So most of them, even when we pick up somebody, some of them maybe knew him. I've worked with him in the past. It was easy to work with those people in there.
Yeah, there was a guy that was like a double agent, right? That they took him out and they killed him, and there was a couple guys, Army officers that were out there.
Yeah,
or maybe they were
that
CIA.
had nothing to do with my operation.
That was
it's
different.
A different
okay.
thing.
Yeah, but that was like a big concern there. Was like people from the Viet Cong who were being spies.
So no, this guy was our people. Never we had a defect from our troops after we recruited them the way we did. So this guy told us that he will set up the rocket on a platform pointing at the middle of a boat going by. Then they lined a string at the line 60 meters away with an electrical activator. And then they had a point of reference given to them. So they knew when the boat hit that point of reference, the rocket was right in front of the boat. Then they activated. So what happened is there was a big explosion here where the rocket came out. The gunship will hit that area. They were not there. They were 60 meters on one side or the other. So what I did, I asked the commander of the unit, Commander William, who was the commander of Navy Naval Base, to bring the pilot of the gunships. They were the Sea Wolf gunship escorting these people, a bunch of the pilots, in one helicopter next to this area on the river. And I set up one of my PRU with a red smoke grenade in the middle. Then we measured that cable, 60 meters, and we put a red smoke grenade, a yellow smoke grenade, or a yellow smoke grenade in the middle and red smoke grenade on both sides. So they can visually see more or less the difference where the explosion where the people were. So from there on, whenever they saw the explosion here, they will shoot the shit out of the area on both sides. But you know what side they were. They were able to eliminate 8 teams, and they had no idea what was going on. And they stopped the rocketing of Saigon.
Wow.
That's what I got from the commander of the Vietnamese Navy. I got the Naval Medal of Honor from him. And for stopping the rocketing of Saigon, I got what they call it similar to our Medal of Honor for the Army. It's called the Gold Cross of Gallantry with Gold Star. That's the highest that they give. Then I have one of that. I have 2 silver stars with them and 6 bronze stars during my whole time in Vietnam in there.
That's incredible.
But it was extremely effective the way we run the operation with them in Vietnam. Now during that time there was an Argentinian general who visited Vietnam in late 1972. In 1971. He visited because the chief of station in there was the chief of station in Argentina. He was a very prominent general, Tomás Armando Sánchez Bustamante. He was the head of the First Army Corps in Buenos Aires, number 2 to the president. The president was a military one, Alejandro Agustín Lanusse was a military president. So they asked me to translate for him, and not only that, they asked me to give him a tour of the military region, explain what we were doing there, which I did. So only one day I spent with him. Then they called me the next day and said, look, General de Bustamante went to see Ambassador Bunker, and he asked him he wants you to be his advisor in Buenos Aires. We told him that you were still here, but if he really wanted you, he could request you later on from our embassy in Buenos Aires. So I think went by. I had several helicopter accidents. Shot down 5 times in Vietnam. My back was in real poor shape.
You got shot down 5 times?
Yeah, my back was in really bad shape. Well, I could hardly walk at one point in time, so they decided to evacuate me in 1972. I didn't complete my 3 years in Vietnam, 2.5 or less. And then I flew to Washington. They had doctors who see me and everything. And then they told me that the general have asked me by name to go to Buenos Aires to be his personal advisor at the First Army Corps. And they were interested in me to go because he was the highest, after the president, he was number 2 guy, and they didn't have anybody in that position. They created a slot for me. And they say, okay, we're going to give you a waiver for your back problem. You have to go to Panama for checkup every 6 months. And you can take the family with you. That's the first time I ever take my family with me. So my wife and I and my 2 kids, we all flew to Buenos Aires in the late 1972. And actually what they did, now before that, what happened, before Christmas time, when I went to Miami, I was called by Ted Shackley and told me not to fly into Miami because there was a Cuban intelligence officer who defected in Paris and told them that his buddy, having drink with him, told him that he was involved in an operation to hijack the plane of the Cuban involved in the assassination of Che Guevara. He had no idea who it was.
To hijack?
The plane of the Cuban who was involved in the assassination of Che Guevara.
Okay.
So not to fly into Miami, go anywhere else, but not to Miami. So
meaning your plane?
Yeah, the commercial plane.
Right.
So what I did is they told me not to fly into Miami. So I flew into Atlanta, Georgia. I rented a car. I drove to Miami. From there,
Holy shit.
Spent the 24th of December with my wife. I spent New Year's Eve with her. We call Los Reyes Magos on the 6th of December for the kid beside the Santa Claus. And then on the 7th, I drove back to Atlanta. I had a plane that leave Atlanta, Houston, San Francisco, and then I had to wait like 4 hours, 5 hours in San Francisco to get another plane to go to Hawaii, Vietnam, or Hong Kong, Hawaii, whatever. I had a cousin who lives there. She's still there. She's married to another Cuban there in Atlanta. So she came to say goodbye at the airport. So I found there was a plane that left 1 hour later. So instead of waiting 5 hours in San Francisco, I decided only wait 4, stay 1 more hour here with my cousin. So I changed plane. Instead the plane that went from Atlanta to Houston, I got a plane went Atlanta, Dallas, San Francisco, 1 hour later. So I spent with her. So when I got to Vietnam that day, nobody was waiting for me at the airport. So I took a Lambretta. I went to the Duke Hotel, that's the CIA hotel. I changed. I got into the embassy, and the first guy looked at me and said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Hey, I supposed to arrive today." And nobody was waiting for me. I said, No. Your plane that we had in record had been hijacked to Cuba. And we were finding out what the hell we do to get you out of Cuba.
What?
They were very concerned. That's why when me and my wife went to Argentina, they took our passport, my wife and I, and they took it to the State Department. They had all the details right, my name and everything, but then place of birth, they put Colorado instead of Cuba. So in case our plane was hijacked, they will claim me as U.S. citizen born in the United States.
Wow.
I remember I still have a copy at home of the passport that said place of birth Colorado.
That's insane.
And then when I came back, of course, I tell people, say I was a U.S. citizen born here for less than a year.
I was born in Colorado.
Born in Colorado.
So what year was that plane hijacked?
That was jacked in December from 1971 to 72.
And it was hijacked and it was flown to Cuba.
Yep.
And whatever happened, did they catch the person who hijacked it? Do you know what happened with that?
No, the face who hijacked it was probably a member of the Cuban intelligence. He had no problem.
And what about the passengers on board? Were they all fine?
They probably returned everybody. The interest was having
only looking
getting
for
me.
you.
And it wasn't there. That's why when I always travel, and imagine this, what happened was the Cuban had access to the airline, to knowing what flight I was going. If I had not done that, and I would have left from Miami, they have no chance to change planes. They would probably hijack the plane from Miami. Because if they were able to find out that I was flying from Atlanta, they will definitely find out that I was flying from Miami.
Right.
What saved me was that I went to Atlanta and I changed plane in Atlanta to stay with her. Otherwise, I have no reason to change plane in Miami. I was living on the same plane, and they probably would have taken me. So I was really lucky during that time.
Did that make you paranoid at all after that?
No, I believe in destiny.
You believe in destiny?
Oh, yes. Look, when I was in Vietnam, Ted Shackley, my boss, used to tell people that I had a death wish.
Yeah.
Because the way I conducted myself in operation, believe me, I am not brave like that. It's not a death wish. God gave me the conviction that I wasn't going to be hit. I was convinced. And no matter what I did, I knew that. Look, went down 5 times, helicopter. My helicopter was shot with bullet, rigged with bullet 40 times at least during the time. I flew like 300 missions in Vietnam. 40 times at least. I never touched me. I had a bullet. I have in my home a fire extinguisher from a helicopter number 38. The bullet came through close to my leg. It hit inside the fire extinguisher. And boy, it was white smoke all over the place in a helicopter. Everybody thought we were shut down. I was in El Salvador. And of course, we fly with no doors, so we took the trim out and the air came down. And I kept the fire extinguisher at my home with the bullet inside the fire extinguisher there.
That's
but I knew.
Incredible.
I just knew it wasn't going to happen to me. And it did. It didn't.
That's super interesting. Do you think that was the same attitude that a lot of people you worked with had? Or did you?
I think that was unique on me. I really believe
it was unique
in that.
to you.
There was a conviction that it's not something that is hard to explain. I knew, beyond doubt. That's why, there should have I could come out with body, I didn't mind, because I know it wasn't going to hit me. I didn't.
Wow.
Ever. I don't have one bullet in my body. I have people wounded next to me.
Yeah.
But not to a helicopter in different places, but I never got a bullet myself.
But it's
not bravery. It was the conviction. I knew it wasn't going to happen. It didn't.
Were there any moments that you can think of in all of your tours, everything that you did, that you thought you might not make it? Like, what was the closest you ever came to death?
Not to death. Well, you could say yes, in Cuba. That time that I was supposed to leave, the day when they got the house and everybody was executed later on. Actually, we went and the boat wasn't coming that day. Didn't come that day. We had to return back. On the way back, there were 6 of us in the car. There was the driver, who later was the owner of the Erasmo Martinez. He was the owner of the Supermercado Presidente here in Miami. We had 3 members of the Cuban Instituto de Petroleum Institute in Cuba, who had just performed a sabotage and destroyed 15 oil trucks, fuel trucks. I mean, they were looking for them for execution, all 3 of them. 2 of them, I think, they were driver. One were driver, the other one were security for the area. And they blew up that. And then one guy came from the Guerilla, from the Escandray, called Diosdado. He's the only one in the group who had a revolver with 5 bullets. And he had one finger was missing. He was shot during combat. He had a type up. So we are coming back 1 o'clock in the morning in this car. And we make a turn. There is a stop of Castro's troop in there, a checkpoint. Never was there before. 1 o'clock in the morning. We were coming like 120 to 140 kilometers an hour. And the driver said, why do I say stop? It just came to my mind. I had a big envelope with name written Clarence in black ink. It was for the CIA guy in Miami. So I put it in here.
Oh,
hide it
Jesus.
here. And we stopped beyond the checkpoint at the speed that we went. I said, I told to the people, look, lower the windows, take the safety out, and if they ask for our documentation, let's try to throw the door to them and try to take a weapon from them. That's the only thing we can do. Mm-hmm. But then on the way by, I put my head out and say, compañero, pasa algo. I mean, real strong. And they look at me and say, no, compañero, no pasa nada, siga. And they let us go.
What does that mean?
Yeah, they saw 6 men inside a vehicle. And the car was a Chevrolet from 1958, black, was similar to the one that the G2, their intelligence service used. Mm-hmm. So the language that I use, the language that they use. So they saw 6 men inside. So I guess they probably thought 2 things. Maybe they are one of us. If they are not and they stop, maybe they are machine and they're going to kill us.
Yeah.
So they told us to continue. Now, when I came back on this following 2 days, which I finally leave, the 3 people from the petroleum thing, they declined to be taken out by boat. They all went to different embassies. When I got to the Venezuelan embassy, one of them was in the Venezuelan embassy. They didn't want to go through something like this again.
Wow.
Let me tell you, if they had picked us up there, we would have been executed by firing squads. Definitely, because there were 3 people from the Escambray, 1 people from the Escambray, 3 who blew all of this oil for the Cuban government, and it was me from the infiltration team. So, you know, that was
early on.
That was tremendous.
That was when you were very young. You encountered. So
yeah,
you had this.
I was in Vietnam. I was in Bolivia. I was 26. I was less than 30 years old at that time.
Right. So, but that experience early in Cuba kind of like primed you for all the stuff that you did after. So you had experienced, you'd come close, you'd had a lot of near-death experiences before that, early on in your life when you were very young, and you'd experienced lots of death early.
Yeah. Now, this after Vietnam, I came back from Vietnam. There was was Argentina. Then when I came back from Argentina, it was on an eventual tour in the Caribbean. I was what they call island hopper. Mm-hmm. Now, Miami is the only CIA base called station. You know, the CIA, when they have people in cities, they don't call it a station. A station are overseas, all of them. All the cities are called base, like the New York base, the Chicago base, CIA people, San Francisco base, Los Angeles base. Those are bases.
Why do they call Miami a station?
Because Miami is the only one who runs a station out of here. For example, there is no chief of a station for the Caribbean. So they have one chief of a station who operates out of Miami.
Got it.
There are different, from the Bahamas, there are different people that we don't have enough people or intelligence to have a personnel in one embassy in those places. So they run our intelligence capability from the Miami area. So I took the responsibility of one of those. I had to take out Dominica, Fort-de-France, all of those little islands. We had agents that I had to attend to. And it was really uneventful. You know, it was very boring doing. The only thing that later on I learned was kind of interesting was I was assigned to evaluate a lady in Dominica, in Rosso, the city of Rosso in Dominica. And she was a school teacher or something, and very bright, a very black young woman. I talked to her, we invited her for dinner. I gave her a very, very high report about her. When they invaded Grenada, I learned that she had become the prime minister of Dominica, Eugene Charles.
Huh.
And she was the head of the coalition who attacked, even though the United States was behind the whole thing, but she was the head of the coalition who attacked Grenada. Eugene Charles from Dominica. I was the one who evaluated her for the agency.
And what did you do to evaluate her? Like, what did you?
No, I never even talked to her. I just learned that.
Oh, you just learned it?
Yeah. So I felt shit. I was the one who gave good word about her to the agency. Apparently, it came through, and they made her prime minister of Dominica.
So you weren't really into the spy stuff.
No.
You were more into the combat, the
Yes.
hand-to-hand, the guerrilla
in
stuff.
in the paramilitary apparatus of the agency. Yes. For example, after that, I had my back was in pretty poor shape in 70. I even today, I have lost. I can show you my driver license. It said that I have 5 feet 11 inches high. If I have 5'6" now, it's much. I have lost so many from the accident, the grinding from the helicopter. I have missed disc. I have one vertebra which is 50% embedded into the other one, and the nerve goes 90 degrees and goes down.
Oof.
The radiologist took a look at that and said, "Look, if I don't see you in front of me, I will look you in a wheelchair. You should not be walking." Now I can sit. I can go in bed fine. I cannot stand or walk. It's tremendous pain in my back. That's what I have. I have a electric. When I give touring here, I have an electric little car that I go
really?
around and in there.
Wow.
Because for me to walk is torture.
Well, I mean, the body is one thing, but your mind is still sharp. You still got it together pretty well.
So
for someone who's been through as much as you
when I
have.
finished that, I did a couple of interesting things. Well, the was time that saved my life was I was still with the agency in '75. I had just been operated from a hernia from the Hialeah hospital. I was in my home recovering, and I got a call from Washington and said, "Look, you have to come immediately. We want you to go to Lebanon." I said, "Look,
Lebanon.
Tom, Lebanon." I said, "Lebanon." I said, "Look, Tom, I just been operated. I just second day in the house. I don't care. Put una faja, put something around, but you have to go. And don't tell anything to our chief of station there." No, he's the boss. He's in Washington. So the guy who was chief of station here, Dick, I told him, I said, "Look, I was planning to retire then. I'm going to go to the Keys to try to find a job." Okay, fine. So I flew to Washington. They instructed me to go to New York, meet this guy, and go with him to Lebanon. What happened is the chief of intelligence of the Lebanese army wanted to set up some infiltration team, intelligence team to penetrate the Hezbollah. And since I got working infiltration team, had the experience and all of that, they wanted me to help him with that. And then they introduced me to this guy, which is well known. He died already. Sarkis G. Soganalian. He was an arms dealer. He represented at that time coal industry for Lebanon army.
Really?
He was the representative of them. But a lot of people call him the merchant of death. And he had his own private plane in Portugal, full with Soviet military equipment. Because it was for Christian guerrilla, but they were Soviet material that he bought in Poland. He just bought the plane from American Airlines, from Pan American Airlines.
He's like Victor Boot.
So here we are. I had dinner with him, with his mother and brothers in New York. And the following day, we flew on TWA first class to Lisbon. Lisbon at that time was communist. Portugal was communist at the time. So when we landed there, he didn't even have a visa or anything like that in his passport. But he had a big roll of $100 bill, a huge one. He started giving tips to the people at the airport. About 10 minutes later, we had the head of the airport with us. I don't know how much money he gave the guy. The guy drove us in his Jeep all the way to his plane. Now, his plane was painted Pan American, but it didn't have the name Pan American. But the tail, yes. The tail was November 7-11 Papa Alpha. PA was being Pan American. That was the tail of the plane. He had an American captain. He had a Cuban navigator called Garavito. Last name was Garavito. When we took off, and the plane was loaded with AK-47, RPGs, ammunition. Oh, God. But it was for the Christian guerrilla. It was for the right people in Lebanon.
It was for the right people.
So we were supposed to arrive and there about 8 o'clock at night, and the army was supposed to be waiting for us. These pilots screw up with the GMT time, and we arrived an hour earlier. I remember landing in Beirut, a beautiful view of Beirut at night. I landed from the cockpit. And I remember he calling the tower and saying there was a Middle East airline contracted plane by the military to go to the military ramp. So they took us to the military ramp. Now, when we arrived there, the authority, which are Muslim, at the airport, they didn't saw a Middle East airline plane. They saw it's Pan American airline in there. So that's where I learned that the word Sharamuta meant SOB in Arabic. Because Sarki was hanging at the door inside the plane. The authority on the other side was trying to open the door, and they were calling Sharamuta back and forth. 1 hour. I was sitting there, I look at the bag and see all of that weapons and shit. I didn't tell my boss in Miami, I was thinking what's going to happen. Now, we waited for 1 hour. The Army arrived. They threw all the muslin out of the area. We didn't even go through customs. They unloaded the plane with military trucks, and then we went to the city. Wow. Now, I had a meeting with the head of intelligence. We started trying to organize that, but then I spent about a month in Lebanon. The day that the war broke completely, they closed the airport. I left on the last plane, was a Gulf Air plane from Lebanon to London.
Wow.
The last day in there. I never got to go back and follow up on that training. It was because the war already broke to a point that there was impossible to do that. So I came back and went back to Miami. Then in 1983, I tried to go to El Salvador because I knew that my helicopter concept would be helpful in El Salvador, knowing the guerrilla in El Salvador. I even went to El Salvador at that time, met with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Fidel Chavez Mena, through his, a close friend of his who was a millionaire. Nothing came through it.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Verso. The older I get, the more I'm prioritizing my health. The goal is to keep my mind sharp and my body strong. If you've watched this podcast before, you might know that I'm very much obsessed with health and longevity and the things you can do to hack your biology to improve performance. I exercise daily and take my nutrition very seriously, but that can only get you so far. Science has, or scientists like David Sinclair have now proven that we can reverse aging with interventions that go far beyond healthy habits. I like to keep up on all the latest science behind this stuff. That's why I keep up with my friend, nutritional scientist, Dr. Dom D'Agostino. And people send me products. I like to test on myself to see what works and what doesn't work. That is why I use Cell Being by Verso. It has scientifically proven ingredients that combat the effects of aging by increasing your NAD+ levels. That's the stuff that quite literally powers every cell in your body. I personally have been taking Cell Being every single morning for years now, primarily because it enhances my mood, improves my energy levels, and I just feel like a younger version of me. Clinical trials have even shown it improves energy, endurance, cognition, fat loss, and better, more efficient sleep. Verso also publishes third-party testing on each batch produced, guaranteeing you get what you pay for. Head on over to ver.so and use the coupon code DANNY, it's spelled DANNY, to get 15% off your first order. Or just go to ver.so/DANNY. It's linked below. Now back to the show.
Then at the end of 1964, I try again to go to El Salvador. I had the luck that my boss from Vietnam, Don Gregg, was then the national security advisor to Vice President Bush.
Right.
And he knew darn well how effective was my operation in Vietnam. And he explained to me what was done, tried to do the same thing in El Salvador. So he helped me. From the Vice President office, he got me an appointment with Thomas Modly, Secretary of State for Latin America. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you, I didn't realize it was so difficult when you volunteer, not charging a single penny to go to the place for yourself. It's almost impossible unless you have something like this behind you. It will not happen.
Right.
Why? Because the military commander was General Gorman, Paul Gorman. He is the one responsible for all the advice all over South America. He's had no interest of one guy from Cuban origin, from the CIA, retired, to come to implement a concept that he had no idea if it works or not. And he is the military commander, and he got no control over me. So he will oppose that, definitely. Now, what we did is Don Gregg got me in touch with Thomas Morley, Undersecretary of State, to explain him my concept. I also brought the picture with Che that helped, when the operation where I captured Che.
Yeah.
So I briefed this guy. Then they got me a meeting with Nestor Sanchez, who was Undersecretary of Defense for Latin America. We did the same thing with him. And at that point in time, then General Gorman asked the White House, the military assistant to the president, it was Admiral Murphy, they asked him that he wanted to talk to me before I went to El Salvador. So I got a call from the White House and told me, call this guy, Captain Elder, who is the special assistant to General Gorman. The general wants to talk to you before you go to El Salvador. So I called this guy. We later became friends. He later became a colonel. He was a captain then, a major Elder. So I called him and said, look, they said, it's the general directive you come to Panama to see as soon as possible. I said, all right, 9 o'clock in the morning, can you pick me up at the airport at 7 o'clock? He said, you mean today? I said, hey, you say as soon as possible. Oh, let me check. He checked with the general and said, well, can you come tomorrow? Because the general is busy today. Say, no problem. I like somebody to pick me up at the airport because I bring in some things that I don't want the Panamanian to see. Say, no problem. Captain Santiago will be waiting for you at the airport. So I brought out my album with things that I did in Vietnam that, that showed them exactly the capability that I had in implementing counterinsurgency operation. So we landed, they picked me up, they put me to a VIP general's room. On the following day, I went to Quarry High to the quarter of General Gorman. And I spent like 5 hours briefing him personally. We were interrupted once because there was a 2-star Peruvian general who arrived and he went to say hello and then he came back again. And then after I finished briefing exactly what and he liked it, the concept that I was going to bring. He said, look, I told him, I said, look, I think now that I am here, if you can get me a meeting with Ambassador Pickering, the U.S. ambassador in El Salvador, so I can brief him with that. They say, fine, but I want you to brief my Mill Group commander, Colonel Jim Steele, too. So I will send you on my private plane. So he had huge plane to travel to the United States. He got a spoiler twin-engine plane called a C-12 plane. And he got his plane to fly me from there to El Salvador.
So for people that are listening that may not know, can you give the context? What was the U.S. doing in El Salvador?
Well, they had military assistant in El Salvador. They had a full colonel called James Steele. They had a lieutenant colonel who was a friend of mine from the Bay of Pigs, Lieutenant Lou Rodriguez in there. They have a full crew. And they were the one who support with military equipment and training. A bunch of command sergeant major advising the military unit. They had an advisor of the CIA, had an advisor, for example, La Pral, who was like a special forces of the Air Force, the special unit.
Who were we training and what were we training them for?
No, they were trained for a special operation. La Pral will go in clandestinely to run into base camp. They did the same thing our special forces did.
Right, okay.
It was a special unit of the Air Force. And the Mill Group supported them with weapons, ammunition, fuel, everything for the operation itself. But my concept was different. They weren't implementing they had no idea what my concept worked like.
Right.
Now, they were used to flying, for example, a helicopter at over 2,000 feet. They never go low because they were afraid. Of sometimes, if you fly lower, much lower than 2,000 feet, then you are really exposed. Either you fly 3 top level, you go high. You don't fly in between.
No in between because you're exposed to.
But they don't know that. They didn't ever experience that before. So I got then the meeting with General Bustillo, the head of the Air Force. Finally, he's the one who will give us the final decision. And I explained him the concept. What he told me is, fine, I have no problem in you doing that, but we have a problem. I said, ¿Cuál es el problema, mi general? What's the problem? I said, well, I cannot pay you. I said, who is asking you for pay? I have my retirement from the CIA. The only thing that I need is a place to stay, give me some food, and that's it. You don't need to pay me a cent. He said, okay, fine. Then we'll accept you. Now, when I finally got there, he had me like a 10-foot pole. I don't know why. He rejected me. If I came this way, he went the other way. He would not even talk to me. I couldn't understand that. I said, look, here I come myself. I am risking my life for these people because I believe that I can help them. And this guy won't even talk to me. But all right, let's go along. So I finally started trying to teach them how to fly the concept. It was hard. Because when I got in the helicopter with one of the other pilots, and I put a 3 top level, he started trying to go up and up little by little, and that's just dangerous. When you are at 500 feet, they can shoot you down very easy.
Right.
When you are in top of the tree, touching the tree almost, when they hear the heli, they don't know what from where you are coming because the sound of the helicopter is diffused all the time. They don't know you're coming this way or that way when you're really close. By the time they see you, you're gone. Because you're going over 50 miles an hour, you're gone. But they understand that. So we programmed the first operation. A friend of mine looked at me with an owner of a property near the Lempa River, whose boat mechanic was kidnapped by the guerrilla to their base camp to fix some sampan, some engine of the boat in there. So I got the guy. He told me exactly with the camp. I flew him on the helicopter like I did in Vietnam. We took the picture of the area. He told me exactly with the camps where I had a full intelligence package. And I tried to do it commemorating the Bay of Pigs, April 17, 1985. I hit for that date. So I took all my intelligence package, go to the Estado Mayor. I presented the package. They looked at it. They knew it was good intelligence. They liked it. They told me, no, you cannot do it on the 17th. You have to do it on the 18th. They had a army battalion not far from that area. They didn't tell us anything. They told the battalion to come in to the base camp. Okay, Didn't told him that they were going in that day. What happened? These people have posts all around the perimeter. They saw the army coming. So when they arrived into the camp, it was an empty camp, brand new empty camp. They have just left the camp, okay? So when we go in the next day, there was nobody there. So the people started laughing at me that my intelligence was false. We didn't know that the army had gone there the day before. So it got to a point that, they were making fun of me, that I carried these little granaditas, the boom, and they fired with a heavy weapon. Because they were not used to use a smoke grenade, the color smoke grenade to mark target in the ground. They never did that at treetop level. So I have to borrow, the Air Force didn't have any. We have to go to the paratrooper unit to borrow this smoke grenade from them to be able to use it in the operation. So when we came back, we didn't find anything. We found a camp, empty camp. I came back. They were making fun of me. I told Colonel Steele, I said, look, I am leaving. These people doesn't want any help. No. I told me, look, I have faith in your operation. Let me talk to the commander of the helicopter units, was Captain Trigueros. So he went to see Triguero and say, look, you didn't do it, because we didn't do it well either. I was supposed to fly in first, treetop level. My machine gun didn't work, and on the river they came back to fix the machine gun. The helicopter arrived before I did. It was all wrong, even though they were not already there. But if it had been there, they would have probably been gone. So they told them, look, you have to do it the way Max, my name was Max Gomez. Max tells them how to do it. So at that point in time, they arrived at intelligence from somewhere saying, hey, there are guerrilla movement in Cerro de San Pedro. So Trigueros tell the colonel, we just received some information, some guerrilla in this area. We are going to try Max concept, and then you can rate us to see how good we did.
Why do they call you Max?
Okay, making fun of
right.
I didn't even want to say, look, try it. So, I got my grenade, I got into the goddamn helicopter, ready to go to Cerro de San Pedro. Well, it was a gold mine. They were all there. First of all, they are not used to helicopter flying at treetop level. Normally, what they tell the guerrilla is when you hear a helicopter, even if you are in the open, you hit the ground and don't move. And it's true. You are flying at 2,000 feet, for example, and you're looking at the ground. Any small movement is attracted to your eyes.
Right.
Immediately, even whatever it is, you get attracted to that little movement. If the guy is static, if he's not moving, even if it is in the open field, you cannot spot him. Impossible. You are looking at 1,000 of a square mile in there. You cannot spot him. So what happened? I am flying on top of the trees. This guy hear the helicopter, go down, they don't move. I lower down, I can shoot them, they're not shooting back. It's ridiculous. Because they were told to hit the ground and don't move. But they didn't tell him, no, with the helicopters on top of you. And I was on top of them. So I eliminated, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 of them that way.
Wow.
Then continue to go. Then they called me and said, hey, there are a bunch of people going on the top of a ravine, going into a wooded area. Not much, on top of 2 mountains, empty, no. So I went up with the helicopter, my other pilot, he emptied the minigun completely on them. There were about 8 of them. They killed like 7 of them. And there was one that survived, and another little kid that ran into the woods in there, okay? And here are some huge backpack, especially there was a female guerrilla. I got close to her. It wasn't even more than 15, 16 years old.
Wow.
And she had a blue, huge backpack in back of her. We know what it was. It was the commander, Nidia Diaz, moving from one base camp to the other. So they have all the documentation from the PRTC, Partido Revolucionario de los Trabajadores Centroamericanos. It's the Workers' Party, Communist Party from El Salvador, from Central America. They were moving on. So I told my pilot, I said, look, ask Trigueros, Captain Trigueros, Sandor Trigueros, to bring some troops. He called back, it was a Sunday. They didn't thought we were going to have anything. There was no troop in a standby to go to react to the operation. The guy said, no. The captain said that no, they don't have any troops to come. I said, okay, put me down. I am going to pick up those backpacks and I will bring it to a helicopter. I'll pick it up. Said, all right. He started putting me down, and then right next to this guy was, I don't know, he could maybe like a Cuban. He was bigger than the Salvadorian, dark hair, and he had a FAL. And he started moving the FAL toward me. So I already have on a strap from the helicopter, I opened fire with the M16 and killed him. The helicopter on top listened, machine gun fire, and they tell my pilot, I wasn't even connected to communication. They tell him, you are taking fire leave. Whew. I almost, I had to have myself in the helicopter because he just took off.
Wow.
And I said, look, we were not taking fire. I am firing at the guy.
Right.
But the pilot didn't want to come down again. So he convinced Trigueros to bring some troops finally. And then we see this guerrilla moving behind a trip. Okay. We run out of ammunition with that. So I always carry my M16 with about 18, 30 round magazines, 30 bullet each. And I learned, which I tell them because they didn't know that, a lot of time, if you try to fire all 30 rounds one time, it will get a jam, normally.
What'll happen?
You pull the trigger with 30 rounds
It'll jam.
to let it go at one time, normally they get jammed.
Right.
And the only reason I learned in Vietnam they don't get jammed, you put the bullet out, you get WD-40 oil, and you spray a little bit like this, then you go like this, put it one by one. You don't have a misfire. All 30 will go straight.
Wow.
And when you fire a guerrilla, you're flying, you don't fly tiro, all 30 around. And you try to spread toward where the target is because it's impossible to hit somebody when you're flying at a certain speed. So I started doing that with a fire, I hit her. I didn't know it was her. I thought it was a he because she had his hair on side of a little. It was a little hat, a camouflage hat.
You hit her?
Yeah, and she said 6 times. It was being in very important place because she survived. And then they come the helicopter and they pick her up. They pick a little kid. They carry, and one were allowed to go. We didn't shoot at him. There were 2 kids about 6, 7 years old. They kidnapped those kids to be able to send documents to the cities and pick up documents from the city because a kid, nobody bothered with them. So they bring to the city, go to this location, he pick up and have they're the point of contact with the city. So we captured her and a little kid that was kidnapped, another place. So when I came back to the clinic where she was being treated, I wanted to get a souvenir, and everybody have taken everything as a souvenir. Their uniform, everything. The only thing that was left was her panties and her brassiere. That's all left.
Wow.
The panties didn't smell good, so I took the brassiere with me as a souvenir, okay? Which created a problem you would not believe. When I was coming home that time, I always came home with an Air Force plane that came once a month to pick up PX thing for the PX, okay? Because I didn't have money to fly back and forth. So every single month, the plane will come for 3 days to pick up things for the PXs in Armed Forces PX in El Salvador. So I used to come in the plane and spend 3 days with my family and then fly back on the plane. So I fly in the plane here. I had the goddamn a brassiere inside my suitcase, and I forgot to mention to my wife. So when she unpacked, she saw the brassiere, and she could not believe it was a war trophy. She was convinced I was doing hanky-panky in El Salvador. I tried to tell her. Well, I was in the doghouse.
That's a hard sell.
I was in the doghouse close to 2 years. In 2 years, Nidia wrote a book after she was released, because eventually she was released, she went to Cuba, then she came back and became a congresswoman in the Parlacén in El Salvador. And she wrote in her memoirs, she wrote a book called Nunca Estuve Sola, I Was Never Alone. And she mentioned at the end in there that I was the one had disrespectful because I took a personal thing of her as a souvenir. So I showed it to my wife. Then she apologized to me for the first time. She believed me after that. Before that, she didn't believe me.
What a story.
Now, while I was flying with the Salvador in '85, that's when I got involved. I went there to fly my helicopter concept. But in September of 1985, that's when Jorge Mascanosa asked me. First of all, he asked me to pick up Posada Carriles. Remember the guy, Luis Posada Carriles, had escaped from a Venezuelan prison. We had him in Aruba. So he asked me if I would go to Aruba and protect him in El Salvador. I said, look, I cannot fly to Aruba because I have a lot of operation. But if you fly him to El Salvador, I will give him protection. That's what we did, So he started operating with another name, helping me in El Salvador during that time. Then, at one point in time, in 1986, I got a call from a letter from Oliver Norris. What happened to him was there was a plane from Caleros, one of the head of the resistance brother, who was bringing things for the Contra from the United States. Now, the only thing at the time, because of the Boland Amendment, that you could bring from the United States legally was uniform, booth, sacks, backpack, communication equipment. That's it. you're going to bring a single bullet
Right.
or a knife or anything from there.
Right.
Well, they had this C-54 plane full with all of these things, civilian clothes, okay? And then what they did, Mario, who was the brother of the other Calero, he brought a television crew, I don't know if it was CBS or NBC, one of those crew. The plane landed at the Palmelora military base, which is American and Honduran. When the Hondurans saw a crew of television, everybody knew they were helping, but not to the point to put it like so black and white on television. So when they saw that crew coming out of the plane, they said, go back. You're not authorized to land here. So they sent the plane back with everything that was on board. Okay? They couldn't do anything. By that time, Oliver North had a C-130 from Southern Air Transport in Portugal. They had bought a lot of weapons in there. And they bought the AK-47, they bought some hand grenades that were all, by the way, all kind of things.
They bought them from where?
Hand grenade from Portugal. The
Oh.
government of Portugal. The plane was already there loading it up. The Honduran, because of what happened, say you are no longer allowed to bring any plane here until we solve this problem with your bosses.
Right.
So he couldn't fly the plane there. The plane was costing him every day standing there doing noise. So then he came to me. He said, look, Felix, and you are very well connected with the Salvadorian. They respect you. See if you can get authority from their Minister of Defense for us to bring this plane down, and we can unload all of this, about 100,000 pounds of military equipment, put it temporarily in a Salvadorian warehouse until we can solve the problem in Honduras, we can bring it back to Honduras.
Right.
Okay? So I went to see the head of the Air Force, General Bustillo. I explained to him what it was. Of course, they wanted to help the Nicaraguan resistance because they knew most of the weapons, all the weapons coming into El Salvador either came directly from Cuba by boat or through the Sandinistas from Nicaragua. So they very are ready to help the Nicaraguan resistance. So he told me, go and talk to Vides Casadón, the Minister of Defense, and tell him that I support 100%. So they agreed. So the following day, I was waiting there. Here comes the C-130 from Southern Air. They unloaded the whole thing. We put it in a warehouse in El Salvador. And from there, they asked me, ask the Salvadoran if we could do maintenance of the aircraft in El Salvador. We will pay for the fuel. We will pay for the mechanics. We will have our own mechanic. We'll pay for every spare part. Oh, they agreed. That's how we got involved with the Nicaraguan resistance. That's how when shit hit the fence, that the plane of Hasenfus went down in Nicaragua.
He named you, right?
He named me. Well, he didn't know my name.
Oh, I thought he actually gave your name up.
He named Max Gomez.
Max Gomez. Okay.
Yes. Now, Mike Wallace went to did a 60-minute with him, with Hasenfus. He did later on in '89. Mike Wallace did a 60-minute of my life.
Did anybody know that you were Max Gomez? Who knew you were Max Gomez?
And Felix Rodriguez, the Cuban government. So the Cuban government is the one who gave the intelligence to the Sandinistas that I was Felix Rodriguez. They gave the information to Mike Wallace. Hasenfus didn't say Felix Rodriguez because he didn't know my name. He only told Max Gomez.
Got it.
And then Mike Wallace wanted to say, well, Max Gomez is Felix Rodriguez because the Cuban told him.
Got it. I see.
And that's how my name came involved in the Iran-Contra thing. That's why then they asked me to testify in Congress as a witness in May of 1987.
What was that like, going through that whole thing?
Let me tell you, it was, how can I put it? It was not, I would say, it was bothersome. I feel bad from the point of view that it's disturbing. They have to be involved in something that have nothing to do really with that thing, and see the political angle that they was going to bring. They all wanted to bring George Bush into that operation. Because of my friendship with Don Gray, they wanted to be able to say that George Bush, that's what they did say actually, that Felix Rodriguez went down there sent by the vice president to violate the Boland Amendment. And the helicopter flying was a cover-up operation for his real operation was to be able to violate the Boland Amendment and help the Nicaraguan resistance, which was not the case. It was the other way around. It was by coincidence I got involved in that thing. So they asked me to testify 28 of May of 1987. And then, of course, I had to, when the plane went down, I had to leave El Salvador, went to Miami. I had to hide, and the plane was, I had people in front of my house. It was a pain in the ass to move from there. Couldn't go anywhere. All the paper was trying to ask you questions. It was a mess. Then I received a subpoena to testify in front of the Iran Contra committee. I had to go several times, and the problem is that everybody wanted me to bring a lawyer, and I didn't want it. Well, no, first of all, I could not afford one.
Right.
But Jorge Mascanosa, the leader of the Cuban American Foundation, offered to pay a lawyer for me, and the White House offered to pay a lawyer for me. Mascanosa, because he didn't want to come out that he was the one who asked me to hide in their Posada Carriles. Even though I told him I will never mention that. But he wanted to make sure that I didn't talk about that because he was the one who asked me to bring Posada Carriles into El Salvador. And then the White House was concerned about the vice president. I told them, look, I told them at one point I was as a witness of the Senate. One time there is, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 depositions at different times with different people. One of them was at the top floor of the Senate, and they were mostly Democrat and maybe 3 or 4 Republicans.
Who was deposing you?
The Iran Contra committee.
The Iran
on
Contra
the Senate side.
Was that Danny Sheehan?
No. That had nothing to do with the Iran Contra.
Oh, I thought
Sheehan was a liar from the Christian Institute.
Oh, okay.
No,
okay,
it had
okay.
nothing to do with
Oh,
this.
okay.
No. He even had to pay. Everything he was saying was BS. Nothing was true.
Right.
No, Sheehan had nothing to do with this. It was really the U.S. government. So as I am waiting, the guy who came out before me was McFarland. They were deposing McFarland.
Yeah, McFarland, yep.
Yeah, I was next to McFarland. And I told them, I said, look, because they asked me, I said, look, people want me to bring a lawyer. But I tell you what, if I have to bring a lawyer for what I have done, I am in the wrong country. And I don't believe I am in the wrong country. Right. I don't need a lawyer. So everybody look at them like I was nuts, all right? So time goes by. The White House insisted again that they wanted me to bring a lawyer. They asked me to go to Washington and talk to Boydon Gray, who was the lawyer to the vice president, and later became lawyer to the president. And he told me, I said, look, Felix, we know the vice president didn't do anything wrong, but you don't know this congressman. They might trick you into saying a thing that might hurt the vice president. We'd like you to bring a lawyer. I said, I won't. I will not bring a lawyer. Well, at least talk to one. I said, okay, but I didn't talk to anybody, one even. So I came back to Miami again. Now, my son and my daughter heard the story that if I didn't bring a lawyer, I was going to go to prison. That's what people told them. When they were kids. I didn't know that until maybe 6 months ago that I always kept a contact with the FBI. Because the situation with Che Guevara, the advisor, I was his advisor, Centeno and I was assassinated in Paris by the so-commando Che Guevara. Major Quintanilla, who was a colonel, was assassinated in Hamburg, Germany, with the commando Che Guevara. And at that time, we're talking the 70s, I got a call in my house saying, Felix Ramos, the name that I used in Bolivia, you're going to be next. But I told the agency. So the agency at the time wanted me to change name, want to another state, which I refused because it's hard. It was traumatic for my son and my daughter to change their name and lose all their friends, and then see our immediate family every 6 months in another state. It was a mess. It wasn't worth it. It was worse than being killed. So I refused that. So what they did, they came to my home. They put iron fences in my house. They built a garage so that my car will sleep inside the garage. They gave me a license to carry concealed weapon. It was very difficult to get one. And now everybody can get one, not at that time. And they gave me a telephone in my car. Now the telephone are waiting list. They're not sold. They're the old one in the car that was with 6 line.
Massive.
In the back, and they think that it was 10 years waiting period for a darn phone.
Wow.
So when I applied, I recall the guy called me from the phone company and said, Mr. Rodriguez, if I am still here, call me in 10 years. Now I called the agency and said, look, this is what I've been told. So they called me back and said, call the guy again. I said, look, he told me 10 years. Said, call the guy again. So I called the Mr. So-and-so, I'm sorry. I know you told me 10 years, but have you heard anything about my phone? His answer was, Mr. Rodriguez, I don't know who the hell you are. For your phone number is so-and-so, will be connected day after tomorrow. And then they took my car. It was a 12-year-old Cadillac Seville. They took it to Langley and they bulletproofed my car. And then I did sign a document for the CIA that if I got assassinated, connected to my service to the agency, my family could not reclaim anything from the agency because they offered me what they considered was going to be the real security of my life. So I did sign the paper. And we never, I stay in Miami the whole time, my same house all of this year.
And they provided security for your family?
No, I had contact with the FBI. If I ever felt I had any problem, because I am federal agency, I could not call the local police. I have to call the FBI. So I always had a contact with the Bureau of Officer.
Okay.
So when I was going to this thing through the Iran-Contra thing, my contact was Carlos Duran from the Bureau, from the FBI.
Okay.
6 months or 8 months ago, my wife learned from his widow, because he died from cancer, that we didn't know that. My son, my daughter went to see Carlos. And they told Carlos, you are a very close friend of my dad. Everybody tell us that if he doesn't bring a lawyer, he's going to go to prison. And we know you are very close to him. Please convince him to take some lawyer with him.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember Carlos called me and said, look, I'd like to talk to you. I said, so fine. So we went to my Florida, all the two of us alone. So what he told me, I said, look, Felix, I want you to listen very carefully. You are going to be testifying in front of Congress, and you're going to be under oath. You cannot lie. Believe me, I have experience. If you lie, they are going to have 15 different depositions, and they are going to ask the same question 15 different times. If you lie, it's going to come out, and you are going to go to prison. You cannot lie to them. Now, if something you don't want to talk about it for whatever reason, you don't remember. They cannot do you anything if you don't remember.
Fifth Amendment.
Lie. That was the best advice I ever got. I never lied.
Right.
I didn't remember very few times. And
Well, you were also there following orders. Like you were, it's not like,
no, I was independent. Remember, I was flying on my own. Nobody was paying me. I have order from nobody.
independent. Okay.
Yeah. I went as a Salvador as a private citizen to help them.
Okay, I understand.
No, nobody.
That's why you need
That's
a
why
lawyer.
government was concerned.
Right.
Okay, that's why he wanted to talk to me, because here's a guy who went from military in my area in Air Force, where I do have advisor. And when I went there, government asked me, I want you to talk to my middle group commander also. And I became very close to Jim Steele. He helped me a lot. I confided with him the operation. He loved the operation I was doing. At the time, he will fly with me after I learned how to fly. I am not a pilot. I was not a pilot. When I was in Vietnam, my pilot told me, I said, look, at least you need to fly this and land this thing. But in fact, I get badly wounded flying at the triple level, we're both going to get killed. So he taught me how to fly the helicopter. And then in El Salvador, I perfected. I could take the helicopter by myself, start on, and I could take a Huey or a UH-500 by myself and fly. After, I've got flown many times.
So what did you?
But I never went to school.
What did you think when you found out about this whole Iran-Contra scandal blowing up and all these people making all this money with the weapons smuggling
That's what I was
and
concerned.
smuggling the drugs back?
I'm happy because I knew the Sea Corps was making a lot of money on this. And that's why my relationship with North broke when I told him. He didn't want to accept it. Sea Corps was the one who controlling the whole money. Okay? I have met Sea Corps before one time. At one time, I was asked when I was retired, after retiring from the agency, to do an evaluation of the political advisor of Oman. So I spent living in Cairo more than 6 months with the political advisor of the Sultan of Oman, who was actually born in Libya. And I met Mubarak. I was in Hosni Mubarak's home when he was vice president.
Oh, wow.
Teaching him how to operate an American 160 submachine gun that this Arab bought 10 of them. One for Mubarak, one for the president. For Sadat, he 6 for the intelligence service. So I have to teach them. It was the first submachine gun with laser beam. And the laser was this big. I mean, it's a huge thing. I mean, with attaching under the machine gun. So I went to Mubarak's home in Heliopolis with this Arab to teach him how to handle this, so he can tell also the president how to operate this goddamn thing. Which they have drums with 154 bullets each. So that's why I met Mubarak. I became close friend of Ahmed Kamil, the head of intelligence for Egypt. I have some very good friends in there. So I stayed there for a while and all of that. So I met a lot of people in different places there. So but going back to this, I have to testify, like I said, in Congress, and I went by myself, finally, with no lawyers. It was, at the end I was tired. I could tell I was really tired on the second day. Now, the first day when you go in there, now I am the only one who go without immunity, without lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And I made a point of not taking one drop of water. Because I saw when everybody was drinking water, the camera would be facing you. So I said, I'm not going to touch the water during the whole time, purposely.
That's
which I
interesting.
didn't. You can see my testimony in
They
C-SPAN.
still do that today.
You go to C-SPAN, and my whole testimony is there. 27 May, 28 of May of 1987.
Mm-hmm.
So the first day is the easiest day, really. The first day is the lawyer that was assigned to me was Paul Barbadoro. Kecker was assigned to, John Kecker was assigned to North. He was the prosecutor for North.
Right.
This guy, Paul Barbadoro, was assigned to me. I was not I am as a witness, not prosecuted by him, as a witness. So we had a good relationship with him. At one point in time, I was bringing a lot of things to his deposition, and he told me, I said, Felix, if you don't want us to see what you have in that drum ring, but we have the power to subpoena anything that you bring in there. I said, look, I have nothing to worry. You can see everything I bring here.
Right.
I don't have to worry about that. So the first day of the testimony was 27th of May. I was the second witness that day. They go all the way from the day that you were born. From the day you were born, they go all the way, all together, until the Iran-Contra thing.
Wow.
They go minute by minute, hour by hour, they go in there. And in details, when you go to the Iran-Contra thing. Then it goes into definitely details. Before that is a general thing, where you were born, when you went to school, per kilometer, everything.
Wow.
High school, everything that you did in your life, regular life. Now, when they hit the point that you started, not only the Bay of People, when they started the Iran-Contra, then they really go in details, to expose the whole thing.
Right.
That was the first day, only for that. The second day, they have the first hour is dedicated what they call the heaters, baseball's heater. The heater were 4 people, 2 senators and 2 congressmen, 1 Republican, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican, 1 Democrat. Those people were supposed to be the one who were assigned to read everything about me, all my depositions. So those 4 people will know more about me than anybody else. The rest of the committee can read whatever they want. But these people are obliged to read everything. In these 4 cases that were my heater, they have to read everything about my life, what I did, everything. So they know more about me than myself, supposedly. Then they start for 15 minutes asking questions. I have to answer questions, okay? One of them was Mish. He was actually the chairman of the Senate, the head of the Senate on the Democratic side. So you have to go through 15-minute question from both of them. Yeah, that's 1 hour. Then they open up the whole scene for the whole people to ask questions. Then anybody in the committee can ask questions. I got question from Peter Rodin. I got question from the vice president of Bush. What is his name? His daughter is the one who became very critical of Trump. Remember, as Congresswoman Cheney. Dick Cheney. Cheney was the last one who was questioning me. So
Liz Cheney?
Yeah. Wow. So they go through the whole thing, 2 days. So when I finish my testimony, if you are able to look at what CNN said, the lady from CNN came and said, after Mr. Rodriguez's testimony, nobody can touch the vice president with a silk glove. That was her comment at the end of my testimony in there. So, and then I went back to El Salvador. I continued to fly with the Salvadorian Air Force. Because that's what I did. So I finished in 87. I continued to fly with the Salvadorian Air Force until December of 1988. I testified in May of 87.
Wow.
Now, when I am in El Salvador, my wife called me, and she was very, very upset because there was my picture when I was in the Army as a second lieutenant appeared in the front page of the Miami Herald. It was put out to the press by John Kerry that I had received $10 million from the Medellin Cartel for the Contras.
$10 million from the Medellin
That's an accusation
Cartel.
of the accusation of Cuban being involved with the CIA in drug. It came from Cuban intelligence.
Really?
Oh, yes. It's amazing. And John Kerry Kerry found out that I had contact with one guy who was the head of the Medellin Cartel finances, Cuban origin. Remember, it's Ramon Milian Rodriguez.
Okay.
In 1985, Raul Diaz, who is well known in the police community, he was the head of the CENTAC, a special unit against narcotics, who persecuted this lady, Grisela. They have a movie about her.
Griselda Blanco?
Grisela Blanco. He was the head of the task force who actually got her. Raul Diaz, a good friend of mine. Mm-hmm. He called me and said, look, I have a guy from the Medellin Cartel who is the accountant for that cartel who told me that he can compromise the Nicaraguan resistance in narco trafficking. He don't want to deal with the FBI or the DEA because he said they are penetrated. He want to deal with the CIA on somebody who have connection to the vice president office because at that time, George Bush was the czar and anti-drug czar of the administration.
Right.
So he thought, I'll bring you to your home. I said, no, you don't bring the SOB to my house. I go to your office. So I went to Raul Diaz's office, and here's this guy, a tall guy, a thin guy. I didn't like him because he was kind of arrogant, and very, excuse me.
Okay. You can take it if you need to.
Very arrogant. And then, I thought I put this thing in. Yeah, I have put in ring, but the alarm. Alarm doesn't go by the ring. So this guy started telling me that he had a recording from an assistant of Daniel Ortega, who was then president of Nicaragua, who asked him to jump bail. He actually said he went from Nicaragua to Guatemala to call him in Miami. And this assistant, Daniel Ortega, told Milian Rodriguez, look, we'd like you to run bail to be able to set up a money laundering operation for the Nicaraguan government in Panama. And we will pay whatever you lose in your bail. Okay. But he said he didn't want to go to prison because what he did, he told me he will probably have to go to prison for 5 years. He didn't want his son to see his father going to, I didn't know whether he have a son or not, but that way he told me, to go to prison. So I listened to his story. When I left, I mentioned the whole thing to Carlos Duran from the FBI. I didn't give it down. He said he didn't trust the FBI. I do trust them. So I passed the whole information to Carlos Duran. Then when I went to Washington, I went to the CIA. I asked for the guy who had to do narcotic for the agency. And they brought me a small guy, bald, heavy, and I passed him the whole information this guy had told me. And he seems to be interested in what the guy had to say. Time went by, they never called him. Raul Diaz called me and said, hey, what happened? I said, look, Raul, if they didn't call you because they're not interested. Later on, I found out that this guy from the agency who was interested, before he did anything, he called Leon Kellner. Leon Kellner was the prosecutor for Ramon Milian Rodriguez case here in Miami. And Leon Kellner told him, don't bother to talk to this. This guy is a liar. That's bullshit. He never had anything to do with the Sandinista. He will do anything to get a lower sentence. That's why they never called him. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, Kerry, while I was testifying in Congress, one Republican senator asked me if I had any knowledge of Sandinista being involved in narco trafficking. So I remember this case. So I mentioned this case of Ramon Milian Rodriguez, who wanted to throw a money laundering operation for the Sandinista. Kerry listened to that, and he sent his assistant, Jack Blum, to find out what the hell this guy is, Ramon Milian Rodriguez. Ramon Milian Rodriguez was at the time in a federal prison with 45 years, not 5 like he told me, with 45 years to do in jail. And Jack Blum told him, if you can compromise the vice president through Felix, now you cannot lie to us, it has to be true, but if you can compromise the vice president through Felix, we are going to lower your sentence. What did the guy say? Now, it has to be true. Okay, what did the guy say? Oh yeah, Felix is a patriot, he never touched a penny. He saw his poor troops in the field that didn't have any weapons, so he came to us and we gave him $10 million from the Medellin Cartel to help the Contras, and in turn, he was going to have the vice president to be lenient with us, which is ridiculous. So Kerry put a subpoena on me because of that, accusing me of receiving $10 million from the Medellin Cartel. Now, my wife is working at that time at Barry University, right next to our home. Mm-hmm. Imagine, front page of the Miami Herald, that your husband has received $10 million from the Medellin Cartel. Of course she's upset. Mm-hmm. So she called me and I said, look, Ross, you know that's not true. She said, I know that. I work at the university. You have to clear this. And these people looking at me like my husband is involved with $10 million of the Medellin Cartel. So, by the way, you have a subpoena from Senator Kerry's committee here. It's like, give me the number. So I called his office. I talked to Jack Blum. I said, look, you don't need a subpoena with me, but send me the ticket in Easter because I am doing mileage. Send me a ticket in Eastern, I'll go. So they sent me a ticket in Eastern. I flew to Washington. They deposed me for 5 hours at Kerry's office. No, Kerry wasn't there. It was Jack Blum, and the other one was Robinette, who was the assistant of Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell was the minority at the time in Kerry's committee because they controlled the Senate at the time. So Kerry was the chairman, and Mitch McConnell was the... At the end of my 5-hour deposition, Robinette and myself from Mitch McConnell's office, I said, we wanted an open hearing. Oh, Jack Blum wanted a closed hearing. I said, well, it's classified here. Look, I retired from the CIA for security consideration in 1976. This thing happened in 1985. What is classified about it? No, it had to be a closed. He didn't want the truth to come out. He didn't want the truth that people believed that we were involved in narco trade. He knew it was going to come out that it wasn't true. He didn't want that to happen. No, it had to be a closed hearing. No choice. That's why I was so unhappy when I got in. The first thing that I told them, they were all the senators, okay, Mitch McConnell and Kerry in the middle, and all the other senators from both sides of the aisle. And they asked me if I wanted to say something. I said, yes. I look at Kerry and say, Senator, this will be the hardest testimony of my life. Now, believe me, this is happening after my testimony in Congress, which is May 27th, way after that. And I say, what do you say that, Mr. Rodriguez? I say, Senator, it's very difficult to have to answer a question from somebody that you do not respect. And I don't respect you what you're doing here. Mr. Rodriguez, because we disagree with you, we are no less patriotic than you are. Because, Senator, you didn't even have the guts to throw your own medal when you were protesting the Vietnam War. Mr. Rodriguez, don't believe everything that you read. I say, Senator, I know that the hell of a lot better than you do. You didn't have the courage to throw your own medal through the Vietnam War. Say, that was a veteran who asked me to throw his medal. It wasn't me. I said, bullshit. It was everybody's perception. It was your medal you were throwing through over the Vietnam, over the White House wall. Well, it wasn't very unpleasant, the exchange. So we went through the whole testimony. Of course, he knew it wasn't true what he was doing, all right? Then we asked for an open hearing. My uncle, who is a lawyer graduated from Tulane, wrote a letter to his committee during 8 months asking for an open hearing. Never happened. 10 months later, I got a call from Robinette. Senator Mitch McConnell said, if you're willing to come to Washington to request an open hearing with him at the press conference at the Senate. So I said, of course. So I prepared with my uncle a statement of 3 pages long, enumerating in details my relationship with Ramon Miliar, what happened, how we became to talk to him, the whole thing in detail. And at the end I wrote, and I'm sure that this will serve, I hope that this serves as for a true situation and not for Senator Kerry's political agenda. That came out in there, okay? Next month, he gave me an open hearing. Friday is the only day which is stipulated in the Senate that there is no cameras in the room. There are cameras in the room from Monday to Thursday, but not on Friday. It was the only date of the week that don't have cameras in the room.
Yeah.
Monday to Thursday, there is camera. But they always reserve Friday. For some reason, they don't want to be camera. He selected that day for me. There was no camera. I was the last witness to be put on, which meant that a lot of people already gone home by that time. There was very few press to cover that. In there, he told me that he apologized, that he believed me, what I said. At the same time, he asked me if I would take a lie detector test. I said, yes, but I want you to take one because you're doing this politically. Well, I will not take one. I say, fine. You don't take one, I will not take one. If you do it, I'll take it. So on those terms, he told me, you are not excused. I say, okay, fine. So we finished the testimony. He did a good thing. He called the best polygraph operator in the nation, and the name was a doctor by the name of Dr. Rafkin from the University of Utah. Brought him to Washington, and he gave a lie detector test to Ramon Milian Rodriguez. First question, did Mr. Rodriguez solicited for you $10 million from the Medellin Cartel? Yes. Deceptive, he was lying. Second question, did Mr. Rodriguez gave you carriers in Central America to channelize those $10 million from the Medellin Cartel to the Contra? Yes. Deceptive, estaba lying. Third question, did Mr. Rodriguez receive in any way or form any money from the Medellin Cartel? Ramon Milian Rodriguez refused to continue with the lie detector test. How did Kerry write that in the congressional record? First two, he had no choice. First question, well, he was lying. The second question, on the third question, whether Mr. Rodriguez received some money from the Medellin Cartel, the operator could not determine the veracity of the question. Now, you read that, what do you think? Maybe some truth to it.
Right.
But they don't tell you, they could not find out because the guy refused to continue with the lie detector test.
Right.
No, I have been saying that all around because I saw a copy of the record at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, they son of a bitch changed that. Now
Really?
Now it says there that exactly what I said, okay? At that time, he put that. Now, the second time, he said the guy refused to continue with the lie detector test. But on the first version that he put out, they didn't say that. But he knew I've been saying that everywhere. Somehow, you know how the hell he did that. We went there and corrected that in the testimony. That's why I hate the SOB so much. Every time that I speak. Now, when there was the Vietnam Veteran for the Truth, no, you heard at the time, they had a big rally on the west wing of the Capitol, over 100,000 veterans against Kerry when he ran for president. You remember that? Check. Okay. There was a rally on the west wing of the Capitol. There were 8 speakers. I was one of them. I spoke to the people that was with Kerry in the boat. One night we gathered together. I was one of the 8 speakers, so we all got together in there. He was never, ever wounded in Vietnam. He got 3 Purple Heart.
Really?
He doesn't have a single hole in his body from a bullet. He would have scratched it somewhere and say that was from a hand grenade or was from a mortar fire, that he got a skirla, metal skirla. The third time, the guy refused to give him the Purple Heart because he didn't deserve it. He had to wait for the officer to change to be able to get the third one. And you know why he did that? Because it was an unwritten law that if you got wounded 3 times in one tour, you could request to be taken away from the operational area.
And that's what he did.
No, it wasn't automatic. You request. Immediately that he requested to leave there. And he claimed that he got some silver star. I am convinced that he fabricated that with his friends in the Navy. That is no, he's a complete fraud.
Wow.
He didn't spend 1 second. He didn't spend more than 5 minutes in a hospital when he claimed he was wounded. He made a scratch, got a little blood come out of there, and say that was from a hand grenade during combat. If you get wounded by hand grenade, or you get wounded from a skirla, from a mortar, you are a recipient of the. It doesn't have to be a bullet. You're a recipient of the Purple Heart.
Right.
But he didn't. He got the three Purple Heart that way, and immediately he left the service. And then he went with Jane Fonda, to call that people were assassinating people, kids, and all of that in Vietnam. That's why when I speak to the different military unit that I go, I tell them how proud I feel today to see how the public treated the military coming from overseas. Because I have been in plane, they applaud them, they buy drink for them, they offer their first seat for them. At that time, they hated. They hated going in uniform because they were the way to spit on you, because you were supposed to be war criminal. You were supposed to kill, and that was due to Kerry's and Jane Fonda's perception of the war. But that's why I don't like the guy at all.
Right. Let's talk about Che Guevara.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
And when you
I left that behind.
Yeah. That's
after Bolivia. That's when I went to Che.
That's an important story right here.
Actually,
thank you for this photograph that you signed.
Okay. I actually went to Bolivia after being in I forgot about the more important one for you.
This is you right here?
Yeah. When I went to Bolivia, I was 26 years old. It was right after coming out before I went to Ecuador and Peru.
How long did you hunt Che for?
Very short. I think we arrived in Bolivia in June. Now, first of all, the way when there was an American, pretty high guy in the Western Hemisphere, CIA, by the name of Larry Sternfield. Larry was the one who answered to Mr. Sterling, Jack Sterling. He was the number 2 guy responsible in great extent for the Bay of Pigs, and Larry was working for him. Larry was pretty high in the agency. He came to Miami, he interviewed 16 Cuba to select 2 to go to Bolivia. Okay. They already had 3 Cubans in Bolivia at the level of La Paz. They were advised to the Minister of Interior, Arguedas, and Mayor Roberto Quintanilla was the advisor to the Minister of Interior there. But then they wanted two guys to be able to accompany the military units in Bolivia to what would supposedly be going against Che. The first combat in Bolivia were a complete total disaster because the Bolivians weren't trained properly.
Right.
Most of the conscript, the soldiers were never used in military training. Barrientos used them in the Corps of Engineers to build roads for the people. That's why they love Barrientos so much. And he had an agrarian reform before that. A lot of farmers had a lot of land. That's another mistake for him. He went there telling them, I'm going to give you the land that Barrientos stole from you, and Barrientos gave them land. So they look at them like, what is the guy telling me? I mean, maybe you have an empty message. That's why during the whole time, which is have never happened in any guerrilla in the world, there was a single guerrilla that never recruit one single farmer in close to a year of operation. Not one guy went with them. It was the Cuban that he brought within 17 altogether with two Peruvians and one German, and the members from the Communist Party, the Raúl Quispay and the Peredo brother brought from the Communist Party. That was all he had. Okay. Now, when Cuba sent him there, was sent him to be killed. Che was pro-Chinese.
Right.
And the Soviets had no interest that we will succeed anywhere in the world because it will be a revolution that will turn over in favor of Mao Zedong in China. When he went to Africa in 1964-65, that he was in Africa, all the weapons that he received was from Red China. Benigno told me that. Nothing from
Who
the
told you
Soviet
that?
Union. Benigno. Benigno and I became very close friends. Benigno was Che's right-hand man in Bolivia. He was wounded once in Bolivia. He was a captain at the time. He was one of the three survivors of the guerrilla Che. He was the only one of the three who defected to Paris later on and wrote a book about the Cuban Revolution, against the Cuban Revolution. And I was in Bolivia after the whole thing finished. I was in Bolivia 3 times. First of all, with BBC of London to do a documentary. The second one was with Telemundo, Channel 51 here from Miami. And the third one with SIG from Portugal. Now, when Telemundo, I had to go two times. One, that was SIG of Portugal. I went to Bolivia once. They did a documentary, my visit with Che. Then the second year of the anniversary, they wanted to do something about Che, but they already had run this first one. So they call it El Reencuentro, the re-encounter. So they put two enemies together that fought in Bolivia against each other. The way they claim if they have seen each other, will kill each other. Now they are together in Paris on the same side, fighting for the same cause. Because Benigno defected and he was against Castro in Paris, and was against Paris. So they flew me to Paris at that time, and we had the meeting at Ileana de la Guardia, the daughter of Tony de la Guardia, who's got married to Massetti, that Argentinian, and her apartment, his apartment, which is in front of a restaurant called Amore Italiano. And they had a real encounter. They had Benigno waiting for me in his apartment with one camera behind him, then one camera followed me. And when I entered the room, for the first time I see each other, we shook hands, and we sat and we started talking. So they have a genuine getting together, two people who didn't know each other, which was interesting. After that, we became very close friends, to the point that every year I will go at least twice to Paris. He picked me up at the airport, and I'll go to his home. I stay and sleep at his home in an spare room that they had, and his wife will cook for me the whole time. And I spent 3 days without going anywhere, only talking to him. The last day, I used to tell him, if I don't see the Eiffel Tower and the Arch of Triumph, I haven't been in Paris. So he drove me to his little car. We go to see the Eiffel Tower, the Arch of, and then we went to see my daughter used to live there for 5 years near the Sena, to her apartment there, and then back home, to his home. We became very, very close friends. Then after we did the interview with him, he wanted to talk to me alone. And then we spoke. He told me at the time, said, look, the guy who really hated you was Raúl Castro, not Fidel, for whatever reason. And he said, we were close killing you several times. He told me, which we never knew about it, that they sent Captain Jesus Bermudez Coutinho, who later became a general, to Vietnam to assassinate me. He had 2 Vietnamese, another Cuban, 2 Vietnamese with him. One Vietnamese, they claimed, was working at the U.S. Embassy, spoke fluent English. And they said one time that they were trying to follow me in the car. I was too fast. They couldn't keep up with my car. And second time, it was very heavily guarded. I don't recall it. Yes, I flew. When I drove very fast with my driver. That's true. And the only time that I could call, that they might call I had bodyguard, which I didn't, is that we had an operation in south of Saigon. I was staying at the Duke Hotel in Saigon. The PRU will come to my hotel in fully gear, because so will I. I will be in full uniform with M16 and everything. And then we will go in several jeeps to the operational area where we're going to launch an operation. Yeah, but not because I was heavily guarded, because everybody was up to here with ammunition and hand grenades and everything, because we were going to an operation, not to guard me or anything like that.
Right.
And then he knew knowledge when they tried to hijack the plane in there. And then they claim another time that they sent Guerilla Melo to assassinate me in Miami. And he was lucky that I was in Miami at the time I went to Beirut in '75. It coincided with the same time. And then this guy told the Cuban government that the CIA became aware of the life attendant in my life, and they took me out of Miami. We never learned anything. I just went out because they had this thing to go in Beirut. So it was luck also. So I asked him later on, why you selected me? Because all of us have basically the same training. Mm-hmm. I had a little bit more because I was in the Dominican Republic and the Communist League of the Caribbean before, but that's it. The rest is the same. They told me, well, at the end of every interview, he will tell you, if I select you, when will you be ready to be mobilized? People will tell you, need a day, a week, whatever time they needed. My answer to him was, okay, if we have time, I take my car, I go to my home, say goodbye to my wife, to my 2 kids, pick up my clothes, I come and we go. It's not time for that. I will call here to my wife Rosa and tell her I have to go. If it's not time for that, let's go, and I'll give you her number, and you call her and you tell her I had to go. He said nobody had told him that. That was the reason, really basic, why he selected me. So we went to Bolivia, and for some reason, I was assigned to work directly with the head of the 8th Division headquarters, Colonel Centeno Anaya. He was the commander of the region, military region where Che was operating. My friend, Gustavo Villolo, stayed with the battalion that's been trained at La Esperanza old sugar mill. There was a special forces unit training, what was called the 2nd Ranger Battalion of the Bolivian, about 600 to 800 men. With the maximum weapons, they were used the same Garand that the U.S. Army was using at the time, because there was no M16 at the time. They were using that. They were using carabines, M2 for the officer, everything that we had, everything. They were being really trained, because the Bolivian troops were terrible. The first combat was a disaster. The soldiers were captured. They were taking their uniform, their boots, and they were sent back with underwear only, and the weapon, everything away. So they trained that special battalion. So when I was an advisor of the 8th Division headquarters with Colonel Centeno Anaya, the head of intelligence, Arnaldo Saucedo, whenever they had capture some guerrilla, I would go with him, or would they capture some document, I went with him to do the exploitation or intelligence of the documentation. So we were lucky at one point in time when they had a prisoner called Paco Jose Castillo Chavez. Mm-hmm. Now, before we went to Washington, we went through some reading in Washington about everything had to do with the guerrilla, to familiarize what we were going to be facing when we got in there. In there were the transcript of the interrogation they had of Regis Debray and Ciro Bustos, one Argentinian and one Frenchman that were captured with the guerrilla. And they spoke a lot of them. So I knew during those interrogatories that Paco was a communist from the Bolivian party who wanted to leave the guerrilla. He was a communist indeed, but he was offered to go to Cuba and Russia. And by the time he was ready to go, thinking he was going to go to this place, and he drove to this place thinking a plane will take him to Uruguay or Paraguay and then give him documentation to go to Cuba, he was given a rifle. And he was not a guerrilla. And he was more of an intellectual, even though he didn't look like one. And he had a tremendous memory. He can tell you meetings that took place 6 months ago, the address of the building and the name of 15 people that were there. The guy was fantastic. So there is an encounter where they killed basically everybody in the guerrilla except 2 That's Tanya, the famous guerrilla intelligence officer from West Germany that was killed in that operation. She was the girlfriend of Che, and she was sent actually by the Soviet to keep tab on Che. And there's two survivors, Ernesto Maimur and this guy Paco Jose Castillo Chavez. I was able to save the life of Paco. Now, Ernesto Maimur at that night, he didn't have even a bullet in his body. He became arrogant with the arm and they shot him before they brought him to Valle Grande. They brought Paco back. Paco have a couple of bullets here, but nothing
really?
to be worried about. So I flew with the Major Saucedo, the head of intelligence, into Valle Grande in a Bolivian Air Force plane. I talked to the guy. The guy had a tremendous memory, fantastic. So they were ready to kill him. When I went to the headquarters, the Colonel Celis was telling General Davila Fuente they already interrogated this guy. He could not contribute anymore, give him the word. They already told the press that he was badly wounded. So I interfered with them. I asked the general, who knew that I have documentation from the president and the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, General Obando Candilla. When we both arrived, one American was waiting for us, and the two of us arrived in La Paz. They took us directly to the house of the President Barriento. He gave us a D card to give all the support we request. And then they took us to the Minister of Defense, who gave us similar D card that we should receive any support that we requested from any authority, civilian or military. And also they were giving ID card as captain in the Bolivian army. Both, three of us, the American and the two of us. So here we are. We had Paco. I flew him finally back to Santa Cruz. And we put him in a room. We interrogated him. I helped him, first of all. I got a nurse to come from the hospital. I paid her to treat him because he wasn't allowed to go to the hospital. He had all kinds of worms, thousands of worms in there. She told me that saved his life because he will eat all of the things. Otherwise, he got gangrene. And then she got something to put in there that they put to the pigs. And you know, there were thousands of these little things coming out dying.
Maggots?
Yeah, the thousand, but there was something, a very small worm in there.
Maggots.
Yeah, but they finally got them out with that thing that they put on pigs, really. It's purple color, a lot of that liquid. And then they injected him with antibiotic, and they saved his life, really. And I allowed him to communicate with his mother. And I brought some newspaper. He was very, 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 very cooperative with me. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. He gave us exactly, and that's how we learned how Che move around the area. Whenever he went from point A to point B, he would send, they had a group of what they call the vanguard. 6 guerrilla will go 1 kilometer ahead of him. He will be in the middle with the head of the guerrillas, and then 5 or 6 guerrillas in the back, 1 kilometer behind. In case there is an ambush, he will be protected in the middle. He could, he could maneuver out of the ambush. So in late September, last day of September, of 1967, there was an encounter of a Lieutenant Eduardo Garindo Granchan. It was a lieutenant from the army, regular army, which is all regular troops, who had an encounter with Che, and they were able to kill 3 members of the vanguard. And they advised us in Santa Cruz, say, look, there is 3 bodies coming up to the city of Pucara, which is passing Valle Grande, so you can come and pick up the bodies, see who they are. So Saucedo and I, the head of intelligence, we drove all the way to Pucará. We waited 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Here comes Lieutenant Galindo with 3 mules and 3 bodies on top of the 3 mules. So when I look at the 3 bodies and took the documentation, one of them was Coco Peredo, who was the leader of the guerrilla on the Bolivian side. The other one was Miguel, whose real name was it was a Cuban captain, Hernández Osorio, Manuel Hernández Osorio. And the other one was another Bolivian who was a doctor. 3 of them. And when you look at the documentation that Paco was given them, 3 of them were the vanguard of Che. And then when I talked to Lieutenant Galindo, I said, Mi Capitan, I saw the guerrilla in the distance. I started preparing my ambush, and the guerrilla surprised me. Okay.
They did what?
Surprised him. The other dead was Mario Gutierrez Ardaya, who was a a Bolivian doctor. The 3 dead. They were members of the vanguard. And he said what he saw was Che Guevara's group in the distance. The vanguard was already coming up the hill.
Right.
That confirmed what Paco was told us, that I was Che there. So when I go back, I was the very end of September, I go back to see Colonel Centeno and said, the chase there, we had to move the battalion. My name was Felix Ramos. I say, Felix, we only have 2 weeks for graduation. They already finished the training. They're going to be shooting to see who got the highest mark in shooting. The president is going to come to issue diplomas signed by the president to all of them. I said, mi coronel, we know that Che is there. And I explained to him what Paco have told us and what this guy told me. Definitely Che was there. Yeah. I said, mi coronel, now we know where he is. In 2 weeks, we have no idea where he is. So I convinced him. So he ordered the battalion to stand down the training immediately to go to the area of operations. So they had 4 companies. One company stayed in Valle Grande, where I stayed with my friend. They stay in there to maintain the communication and the supply of weapons and food to the battalion in operation. One company of less than 200 men was commanded by Captain Raul Lopez Layton. He was assigned along the Rio Grande, so the guerrilla could not move to the other side. We could operate anywhere in country, but the other side represented the 4th Division headquartered with Colonel Terán. It's different from areas operation from us. And these people were already used to, and they respected Colonel Centeno Anaya in 8th Division. So they didn't want to go to Requeterán on the 4th Division. So they put a company there to make sure they didn't cross the river. Then one company was put in reserve by Captain Celso Torrelio, who later became president of Bolivia. And this captain was in the last place where Che was being seen, was Higueras, to react and support the company was doing the search for the Gary Prado Solomon. They started basically at the first day of October, moving into the operational area. Here comes the first weekend, okay? It is a Sunday was the 8th of October. On Saturday, the 7th, we learned that later. On Saturday, which is the 7th, my friend had trained a special unit, a Bolivian unit in intelligence. Soldiers that spoke the different language, Quechua, Aymara, and Guarani. And those people were sent in civilian clothes with no weapon ahead of the battalion to talk to the civil population. It was easier for them to communicate in civilian clothes. They see a military sometimes, they resent it. So these people went ahead of the battalion to get intelligence for the battalion. And they came back that evening on Saturday and said, look, a farmer have an hortaliza, where he cultivates some tomatoes or whatever, and he said the guerrilla is right there. He gave the location in the map. All of them are located there right now. So that night, Gary Prado surrounded with his 200 and some men, he's around La Quebrada del Yulo, 600 men, completely. That was on Sunday morning, he started advancing, moving in later. That's when the firefight took place. And then all hell broke loose, all right. I was my friend had a girlfriend, I understand, in Santa Cruz that he wanted to go there, so he left for the weekend. I was the only one who stayed. And what I took the time was, I know there were 3 IT-6 combat aircraft that had the capability of firing 50 caliber machine gun and 2.75 rocket, but those planes didn't have any communication with the ground troops because they had PRC-10 radios that communicated on 55 megahertz. And the planes that the Bolivians have was working on VHF, 100 and some megahertz. They cannot talk to each other.
Right.
So I borrowed 3 PRC-10 radio from the Army, and I started installing one next to every pilot. There's one pilot in front, one in the back. So they'll be able to talk to the ground, be able to help them get air-to-ground support. If they don't talk to each other, they cannot do that.
Right.
I had just been finished. That was Sunday. I was just been finished. I was working on the 3rd plane when Saucedo saying, mi capitán, you just got word from the operational area, the Papa Cansado, that is tired, which means that the head of the guerrilla is captured alive. I think he's wounded. But we don't know whether it's Che Guevara or it's Inti Peredo, Coco's brother, who is the head of the guerrilla on the Bolivian side. So I stood in the back of the 2nd plane. Major Serrate, the head of operation, went in the back of the pilot of the 1st plane. We took off. So we flew over the operational area. So when my radio, they told us, Papa Cansado es el extranjero, is the foreigner. So we know it was Che that was captured alive. So we came back, informed that to Colonel Centeno. He dispatched, we had one small helicopter, shitty helicopter. It was one long seat for 3 people, and the pilot was only one seat in the middle, very small helicopter. He sent that helicopter with Lieutenant Colonel Andres Celis to go to the operational area and try to secure all of Che Guevara documentation, so the people will not take it like souvenirs, shit like that.
Right.
So the helicopter went, dropped him in the operational area, came back. The pilot was a major from the Bolivian Air Force called Jaime Niño de Guzman. Was the the captain, the commander of the helicopter pilot, a major. So that night I had a couple of bottles of scotch, and I was no better time. Valentine was a teacher, one of the two. I brought it up, and we had a big brindis. We drank for the finish of the guerrillas in Bolivia. That's what Centeno told them, that finally peace is going to come to his country after this. He foresaw that was the end of the guerrillas in there. And then I asked him if I could go with him. Everybody wanted to go with him. Now, because of the helicopter could carry 4 people all together, including the pilot. But because of the altitude of where we were, it could only take the pilot and 2 more. Colonel Centeno, somebody else. There was a lieutenant colonel, all the others were major, I was captain. But I had an excellent relationship with all of them, so I asked him if I could go with him. So Centeno spoke to all his officers after we had a brindis, a drink with all of them, and said, look, I know that all of you want to go, but I want you to understand, Captain Ramos, this guy has done a lot of harm to Captain Ramos' country. You don't mind, we'll take him with you. Everybody agreed. So I am also a radio operator. I have an RS-48, a little briefcase where I transmit in telegraphy, in code. So that night I sent a message to Washington through an embassy nearby, telling them, say, look, Che's captured alive. You have told me to keep him alive. If you still want to keep him alive, move at the highest level, because these people are not keeping any prisoner. And I asked for another contact, permanent contact, which they refused, but they give me a contact another day in the morning, about 10 o'clock in the morning or something like that. So, man, I guess I didn't sleep at all. It was 5 o'clock in the morning, I was ready. I went to the runway, waited for them. At 7 o'clock in the morning, we took off in the helicopter. Centeno and I sitting Centeno here, I was sitting on his right. The pilot, Jaime Niva Guzman, half an hour flying time. We landed right in front of the house of La Higueras, a schoolhouse. Now, what they present now, that the area where Che died, is not that the place, because the Bolivian army destroyed completely the old building where he was. Now, the Cuban government rebuilt that in concrete, which is not the original. It's the same area,
okay,
but it's completely a different building.
Right.
So we landed next to the original building. They were waiting for him, all the officers. Felix, who had all the documentation, Sheehan in the back, Ayoroa, who was the executive of the battalion, all the captains were waiting for him. So we went to the room. I accompanied the colonel and the other 3 or 4 other officers with him. We entered the room. The door is here, the wall is right here, and there's another door here for another room in there. And there is a little window on this side. The other room doesn't have any window in front, have a little window on the back side on the left. So we enter in here. The first thing that I see in front is the dead body of 2 Cubans. They had the body of 2 of his friends, 2 captains that died in combat that day. They put him right inside the same room on the back of the wall. And Che was tied down under this little window here, hands and legs. So Centeno started asking questions. He looked at him. He didn't say a word, nothing. To a point that Colonel Centeno said, look, you invaded my country. The least you should have the courtesy of answering me. Nothing. So he was bad. He left the room with all of us. Then I asked him, Colonel, can you give me his documentation? I'd like to photograph it for my government. So he turned to Colonel Felix and told him, give Captain Ramos here your bag. Now, he had already taken, but I didn't find the passport. The colonel had already put it in his pocket. I didn't see the passport. But he had inside there a big book made in Germany. It was written like in January, February, and the number was in German numbers, but it was written in Spanish. That was his diary. Okay. He also have a little booklet, a black booklet, that was type-reading messages in Spanish, signed by Ariel, that message that he received from Cuba. Now, he could not transmit to Cuba. For Cuba, I think, purposely sent, the only transmitter they sent was him arrived broken. So he could not communicate with Cuba. He could only receive message, but he could not send any message to Cuba. Okay. And he had the code book. The code book had been given to him by Red China, the communists. The Chinese have their codes are in numbers, numeric codes. So they're little booklet like this. It looks like this high, 1.5 inches or 1.5 inches and this high, and you have glue around. And it's numbers. A group of 4 numbers, 1 in red and 1 in black. One for ciphering, one for deciphering. There is more complicated because you have to write a letter, then that letter corresponds to a number. It's almost impossible. It's impossible to do. The second hour, for hour it was letter. It's more simpler, but the same thing is impossible to decipher. When it is letters at random, there is no computer who will decipher that. Okay, so he had that from Chinese. There are several, like 8 or 10 books like that in different color. Then he also has some medicament for his asthma, some picture of his family in there.
He had asthma.
Yeah, he had that. But not when he was with me, he didn't have any asthma attack. But he has asthma, he has equipment in there for the asthma. So I got all of this. I went to a room they call a telegrafista. That's an area where they have one telephone line. Later on, when I went back with BBC of London and the other people, there was nothing. Okay? They don't have any communication out of Higuera. At that time, they have one telephone in a room that communicated with line all the way through the jungle to the Valle Grande, this crank thing. Lousy, but you can understand, more or less, okay? To be able to do one line at the time. So I stayed in there. I put a table out in the middle where there was the sun, and I took my camera. I had my Pentax camera with a bunch of film. I used all my film of 35 millimeter. Fortunately, I have the Minox German camera, and the roll that I had 40 pictures each. I had a bunch of rolls. So I was able to photograph completely the diary, every single page of the diary that he wrote on there. In the middle of that, I interrupted. I went back to the room where he was. So I stood in front of him and said, Che Guevara, I'd like to talk to you. He looked at me very arrogant and said, nobody talks to me. Nobody interrogates me. So when I saw that attitude, I said, Comandante, I didn't come here to interrogate you. I'd like to talk to you. I admire you. You used to be head of a state in Cuba, and you're here because you believe in your ideals, even though I know they are mistaken. I just came here to talk to you.
Did you really admire him?
He looked to me for a while to see if I was making laugh of him, if I was laughing. When he saw that I was serious, he said, can you untie me? Can I sit? I said, sure. So I called, Soldado, sí, mi capitán. He came in. Quítale las amarras, Comandante Guevara. Que le quita las amarras, Comandante Guevara. You know, untie Commander Guevara. So they untie him. I had a little chair and we had a little bench on this side. We got the bench and we helped him because he could hardly move from all of that time put him there. And he had a bullet in here, through here. He had been a new gas, white, was very clean, was put on, but you could still the blood coming out a little bit from the side there. The only wind. Nothing serious, really. So we sat him in the bench, and then I started talking. Now, whenever I asked him anything that was of tactical interest to us, he will tell me and say, I cannot answer that. So I went along with that. We continued to talk about different things. At one point in time, he started telling me that the Cuban economy is in shambles because of the embargo, American embargo. When I look at him and say, Commander, that's ironic that you tell me that. He said, why? He said, because you were the Minister of Commerce in Cuba. You were the President of the Cuban National Bank. You are not even an economist. He said, do you know how I became President of the National Bank? I said, I have no idea. So I was sitting one time with Fidel, listening to Fidel. I was talking to Camilo Cienfuegos. I understood that Fidel was asking for a dedicated communist. I raised my hand. And he was asking for a dedicated economist. So in my opinion at that, I thought he doesn't want to answer the question. But then when I met Benigno in Paris, he told me he was right. He said, Felix, I was with them. Because Benigno was also, he was at one point in time in La Sierra Maestra. He was working with Camilo Cienfuegos, not with Che. He said, he understood that Fidel was asking for a dedicated communist, and he wrote his hand. Fidel was asking for a dedicated economist, and that's how he became president of the National Bank and Minister of Commerce and Industry in Cuba.
He heard communist when he was asking for an economist.
Then we continued to talk at one point in time, and then I told him about, when you were in Africa, you had the African, they told me, were very poor soldiers. Oh, I want to talk about that. I said, well, you don't want to talk about it. Your own people have said that you had like 10,000 guerrillas, and they were very poor soldiers. So he looked at me and said, well, if I had 10,000 guerrillas, it would have been different. But you're right, they were very poor soldiers. And then that's the only time he admitted that. Then we talk about it. He said, why do you select the Bolivia? He had the three criteria why he selected Bolivia. First of all, in his mind, imperialist United States will not be that much interested in a very poor country like Bolivia. Bolivia had no real rich resources for the United States. If it was Venezuela with oil, yes, but Bolivia don't even have port. they felt the United States will not be that much interested in putting so many things in a country that doesn't mean anything economically. Second, they knew that the Bolivian army was very poorly trained. Absolutely right. That's why at the beginning it was a total disaster. A third, most important to him, Bolivia has boundary with 5 different countries. If you take Bolivia, he could export the revolution border to border with Brazil, with Argentina, with Paraguay, with Chile, and Peru. With all 5 different countries. That was the more important thing. So we talk about, very things. At one point in time, he looked at me and said, "You are not Bolivian." The commander, "Who do you think I am?" He said, "Well, you can either be a Puerto Rican or you can be a Cuban. And by the question you have been asking me, you are working for the United States Intelligence Service." I said, "Yes, I was a member of the Bay of Pigs infiltration team." He said, "What's your name?" He was interested in my name because they had an infiltrator with the infiltration team where I was. His name was Benigno Perez. He was a lieutenant in the Cuban army who allegedly had defected to us. And he was part of the infiltration team. His team, when landed, everybody was captured. And then people saw him, they promoted him to captain, in captain uniform of the rebel uniform, going to a different prison after the Bay of Pigs to see if he could identify persons like me that were in prison. Because he knew our faces and he knew our true name. But we went in Cuba with fake names. So if we registered in a prison because we were captured, we were giving them the documentation, which is not our true name. So they were using him to go through the different prisons to see if he could identify people like me in there. Wow. Benigno Perez. But I didn't know what's going to happen to him, so I say Felix, and Felix really didn't mean anything to him at all. So we continued to wait to see what happened. Now, when Centeno came, before that, I got a phone call from a lady. Now, Centeno was in the operational area still. During the combat was going, you could hear the mortar fire and the shooting and all of that from where we were. Here comes a little lady and said, first of all came the landline. Mi Capitan, there is a phone call for the highest ranking officer, which is you. We have 2 lieutenants here, you are the only captain. So I go to that, we call Telegrafía Diario, where I made the photograph, the diary. And then they say, I think it was Saucedo, because a very poor communication said, 500, 600, alto, orden del alto mando, order from the high command, 500 and 600. We had a very simple code, 500 Che Guevara, 600 dead, 700 keep him alive. Okay. I asked twice, 500, 600, they wanted him killed. So when Centeno came before he left, I called him and I said, mi coronel, there is order from your high Bolivian command to eliminate the prisoner. We received the order 500, 600 from your people. My instruction from my government is to try to keep him alive at all costs. It's very important for us. We'll have helicopter and plane to fly him to Panama for interrogation. He looked at me and said, Felix, we have worked empirically. We're very grateful to you, but this is order from my president, my commander-in-chief. He looked at his watch and said, when I leave, the helicopter is going to come several times, bringing food and ammunition and taking our wounded and our dead. After 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it's going to come to pick up Che Guevara's dead body. You can justiciate him any way you want because we know how much harm he has done to your country. So the colonel tried to make them change their mind because it's very important to us, but I give you my word of honor that if there is not a counter-order, I will bring you the dead body of Che. Then he told me, and I said, you can justiciate him any way you want because we know how much harm he has done to your country.
Yeah.
And he left. Sure enough, the helicopter came. One time, that's what that picture was taking. Because I never even thought about getting a picture with him. What? I was talking to him when here come the pilot, Jaime Guzman, said, Mi Capitan, Major Saucedo wanted a picture with the prisoner, and he got the 35mm camera from the head of intelligence. So I look and say, Commander, do you mind? I say, no. So that when we helped him, I was the one who helped him. I hold him. He was limping a little bit because of the bullet he had in his leg. We went around the schoolhouse. We sat in there. There's right now, the door is in this way here, about here. Mm-hmm. This is the little bit of wall that it's not even a building behind that. This is empty behind this.
Okay.
I gave my camera to the pilot, Jaime Guzman, and he was the one who took the picture. Just before that picture was taken, I put my hand around Che and say, Comandante, mira el pajarito, look the little bird. We tell that in Cuba to los niños, no? Look at the little bird, look at el pajarito to take a picture. And he was laughing.
To get kids to smile.
He was laughing. He laughed. And I look at the camera. I thought, actually, when I sent this picture to the CIA who was embedded in one of the roles that I put in X, I told the guy from the agency in La Paz, I said, look, this is a roll of picture of me with Che where Che is laughing. Because I thought he was laughing at the time the picture was taken. But he changed for that expression. Seconds before that, he was laughing like hell.
What was the conversation like between you and Che after you got the order that he needed to be killed?
No, I didn't tell him anything.
You didn't tell him anything?
No. I started waiting to see what happened. I went back. We spoke several times on and off.
Wasn't there a moment when
let me tell you, even I thought, in myself, talking to myself, all right, they want him alive. How about if I call the landline, telephone line when the helicopter comes, and I tell the pilot that my government convinced your government to keep me. We just got a phone call, said to change order that my government were able to convince your government to keep him alive. And if they tried to call the line, they could not communicate with it. Maybe yes, maybe no. Then I thought to myself, hey, remember what happened when Batista released Fidel that December, what happened to Cuba? And I told myself, you're here to advise,
right,
not to be the commander. And I told myself, if you do that and you are successful, and he's released, eventually, and he goes to another country, a lot of people get killed because of him, you are going to be responsible. And that's not your responsibility. It is the responsibility of the Bolivian. Let history run its course. So I didn't do anything else to save his life at all. And then I started waiting to see what happened. Then the helicopter was gone. Here come this lady, about, I don't know, it was 12:40 in the afternoon with a radio. Mi capitán, when are you going to kill him? I say, Señora, why do you say that? I said, look, we just saw you being photographed with him in front of the schoolhouse. Look, the radio already gave the news that he died from combat wounds, and he was still alive. So at that time, there's not going to be any counter order. So I got into the room. I stood in front of him. He was sitting in the bench. He looked at me. I looked at him. I said, Commander, I'm sorry. I tried my best. It's order from the High Bolivian Command. The guy looked at me and he turned white like a piece of paper. I had never seen somebody whose face turned white. I mean, literally white, like the blood had drained out of his face. He didn't move a muscle. And then he said, it's better this way. I should have never been captured alive. And then he got the pipe and said, I'd like to give this pipe to a soldadito who treated me well. Now, he got the pipe. When I arrived, he wanted to smoke. He didn't have picadura from tobacco. So I asked a soldier to give me a couple of cigarettes. So he got the regular cigarette. He opened it up and put what was inside the cigarette inside the pipe, and then he smoked with me. I allowed him to smoke from cigarette because we didn't have a pipe, smoke for the pipe. So I wanted to. Then I said, at that point in time when he said that, Sergeant Terán, we knew was the one executing people, burst into the room. Yo quiero la pipa, mi capitán, yo quiero la pipa. And Che dijo, no, a ti no te la doy. Digo, salga de aquí. Que yo quiero la pipa, mi capitán, salga de aquí. Che had the pipe here. When he went out, I looked at him and said, Commander, would you give it to me? He saw for a few seconds and sí, a ti sí te la doy. I will give it. So I got the pipe, I put it here. It's anything you want for your family. Then I will say it in a sarcastic way. He said, well, if you can't tell Fidel that he will soon see a triumphant revolution in America. And then he changed and said, and you can tell my wife to remarry and try to be happy. That was the last way. So very emotional. And me especially, because I have never ordered anybody which is in prison being killed. This was a very unique and very unusual circumstances. So it was emotional tremendously for me, that moment in sea. So we looked at each other. He came to where I was. We shook hands, looked at each other's face. He embraced me. I embraced him hard. Then he let go. He stood in attention. I looked at him. I went back. I shook his hand again. I embraced him, and I left. And it was hard. I hope I never had to go through that again. And then I went out. It was Sergeant Terán was next to the other officers in there. And I told him, I said, Sargento, do not, they're ordered from high Bolivian command to eliminate the prison. Don't shoot from here up. Shoot from here down because this man's supposed to die from combat wounds. See me, Capitan, see me, Capitan. It was exactly 1 o'clock in the afternoon because I looked at the watch when I left. I walked toward the area where I was photographing the diary. I sat in the bench taking some note. At 1:15, I heard a short burst of machine gun fire. It was an M2 carabine. He borrowed, because the soldier have a regular gun, he borrowed the automatic, full automatic M2 carabine from Lieutenant Perez, who was next to him. He was a lieutenant that was very, very, very short, very small. And it was 1:15. I took note. Then I went in there, and I would say for a long time. Maybe 2-3 hours later, here come Gary Prado and Celso Torrelli, two captains, and then I joined them and we go into the room. When we arrived into the room, his body was like this sideways. This door was like this. His head looking at the ceiling. The two dead bodies were still there, and his face was covered with mud. Now the floor is dirt, it's mud in there, very humid. Okay, the walls were made out of clay, type of clay or dirt, mixed with a little stone and some thing from the trees. That's the way they mix together. And it's very, very, they say, insulating. It really keeps the cold out or keep the heat out. It's very, very insulating. And then, of course, they had the straw on top of the wall itself had some straw, some small stone. Of course, I brought a bunch of those stones later on when I went back, finally brought a bunch of that back home before they destroyed the house on the other side. So here we are. I asked them, I could hear the helicopter coming. When they heard the helicopter coming, they left, both of them. All right. Now, when we came in, Celso Torrelli had a little stick. He said, "You son of a bitch, you have killed so many of my soldiers." And then we embraced on top of the body, and Gary Prado said, "Mi capitán, hemos acabado con las guerrillas en América Latina. We have finished the guerrilla in Latin America." And told him, "Mi capitán, if we have not finished them, at least we have delayed them for a long time." Then here the helicopter, they took off immediately. So I asked to a soldier who was there to bring me a bucket of water because his face was covered with mud. So I got a bucket of water, and I sat next to him. I got, with my hand, I cleaned all his face. I completely took all the blood out of his face, completely, the mud out of his face. I tried to close his jaw with my handkerchief, which I lost with the air of the helicopter. It was successful in closing in there, but then I lost and it went back again. I tried unsuccessfully to close the eyes several times. Put it back in, went back on. I've been about more than 2 hours or so.
Is that normal?
Yes.
They stay open?
When you are so long, even you have to try to move an arm, you won't. They are
Right.
At the beginning, yes, you can move it. If it was maybe a few minutes, you can keep it a while and it will stay there. When there are several hours, it's already frozen that way. You can bring it down, but when you let it go, it goes up again. So I could not close the eye. This I could. But then with the air of the helicopter, I lose my handkerchief, and when you see the picture, his jaw is down in there. So I got the body. The two captains left. He didn't want the helicopter to see or anybody to take picture with him and the body. I took the body on one side, two soldiers on the other side. We took it to the right pontoon of the helicopter. When I was trying to tie it down, el mayor Niño de Guzmán, the pilot said, "Mi capitán, move him forward to balance a little bit the helicopter." Apparently, it's a little bit to the. So I put my hand under him. It was una camilla, a stretcher under it with plastic. And I pulled it out. When I got the hand out, I could not see it, completely covered with blood. Apparently, the one of the bullets hit the aorta, and it was a big pool of blood. When this thing is plugged, it doesn't allow the liquid to go down, to drain down. I didn't say a word, but I thought to myself, in my mind, there are persons that have a lot of blood in their hand. I had a hell of a lot of. So I didn't say a word. I just thought that it came to my mind. Then I cleaned the blood on the right side of my pants. I went down, continued to tie the helicopter, tie the thing around his, which I lost with the air of the helicopter. I jumped into the helicopter a little bit to the left to balance the helicopter on the long ship. And at that point, a soldier came and say, "Mayor, Father Chiller want to see him." So we stayed like 2-3 minutes with the engine running. Here come this priest riding a mule all the way around. He was fairly close to being decapitated because we were in a little bit lower ground than where he was coming from. But just this much from the plane, he came down from the mule. He went a little bit closer, and then twice. Which I took picture of it with my Minox camera. That's the only one that I have left. And I thought to myself, this guy was an atheist. He didn't believe in God. Nevertheless, he received the last ritual from the Catholic Church. Wow. And then we took off. We took off for. And let me tell you, there were times that we were talking, I wasn't paying any attention. Be honest with you. I don't know what he was saying. I was looking at this guy in front of me. The guy looks like a beggar. It's a guy who didn't have proper clothes. He had a jacket was in rags, filthy. The hair was filthy. He didn't have any pair of boots. He had some couple of leather, very badly tied down to his foot, like shoes. They weren't shoes. Very. To a point, you feel sorry for some individual like that. I felt sorry for the guy. And my mind, when he was talking, I wasn't even paying attention to what he was saying. My mind was, I never met him personally, but I remember him when he visited the Soviet Union, when he visited Mao Zedong in China. I remember that guy, which seems to me much taller than what he was right there now, with this big abrigo, the overcoat with the leader of the Soviet Union and the leader of China, very arrogant talking, and looking at this guy, it could not be the same person. It's impossible. I mean, it strikes so different what I was looking at and what I knew or remember from him and that. So it wasn't, but it was probably one of the hardest moments of my life to go through with that decision. I knew I had to do it. It was no question about it. I hope I never have to do it again. I never will, hopefully.
Did you really respect him? Did you, in that moment, did you have some respect for
look,
him?
When a guy accepts his faith and he died like a man. Look, for example, he took people in exile. He will say, "Oh, Che Guevara pleaded for his life. He begged, he cried." Bullshit. He didn't do that. Other people will say, Cuba will say, for example, he talked to me and say, "I don't talk treasure," and he spit at me. No. We both treat each other with mutual respect, all the time. All the time. Now, some of my friends will tell me and say, "Well, if he had been the other way around, he would not have treated you like that." I say, "I know, but that's the difference between them and us. It's a hell of a difference between what we fight for and what he fight for."
What kind of person was he? How did he treat people? How did he treat prisoners?
Well, being captured, you take another personality. Está vencido. You are down. It's different when you are in power. Now, I had some experience that tell his real character, tell a lot of who he really was. For example, here in this museum about 5 years ago, came a lady, and she came in a wheelchair. She was the sister of a friend of mine who is a paratrooper during the Bay of Pigs, Castaño. Mm-hmm. Their father was a captain in the Cuban police, the anti-communist police, called BRAC, Partido de Represión Anticomunista, that Batista had. It was specifically against the communist unit. And Fidel and Che hated them. Now, he was a lieutenant in that unit, a very decent guy, okay? They had him to be executed, but they allowed the family to visit him. So she was telling me here one day, she said, "Look, I went to visit my father on Saturday. I get up normally about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning to be at La Cabañas early, very early, because it would be alone. There would be hundreds of people to visit their family that were in prison. So I arrived one of the first. When I arrived, there were already people there. We arrived at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, waiting in line. By 11 o'clock in the morning was a huge line. We were fairly in front. There was a lady in front of her. Che Guevara arrived about 11 o'clock in the morning. He came in the Jeep. And this lady in front started yelling at Che Guevara. And everybody said, "Coño, cálmate." No. She was so persistent, Che Guevara noticed her, and she came in the Jeep. Came down the Jeep. "Señora, ¿qué le pasa a usted? What happened to you?" And then the lady told him, "Commander, my son is 15 years old. He's been in prison for 2 weeks. He have done nothing. He was not condemned to death penalty.
How old?
15.
15.
15. He was not condemned to death penalty. He was just in prison for whatever he did. Okay. I haven't been able to sleep in 2 weeks. Please release him. You know, he's 15 years old. He haven't done nothing. What is the name of your son? Bring her son now. So she waited. The guy went. When he saw they went, they took a little while. Came with the kid. When the kid came, 15 years old, right in front of her, he hit him on the face. Hijo de puta, por tu culpa, tu madre lleva 2 semanas on because you are responsible for your mother not sleeping in 2 weeks. Put out his pistol and shot him in the head in front of everybody. And everybody in the line started calling him hijo puta, asesino, comunista, son of a bitch, you assassin, communist. That's the end of the visit today. Everybody go home. There is no visit for prisoners today. So everybody had to leave there. That was the true Che Guevara. And when you read his letter to his father, the first time that he had killed people, he wrote to his father, it's a matter of the Cuban record, that he found out that he enjoyed killing people. Okay. When I talked there was a guy who trained him, he was a Cuban, which I met. I became friends with him later on. He worked with me, even though I didn't saw him at the time, the Dominican Republic in 1959. He was working with the Dominican Chief of Intelligence, Avis Garcia. He told me, he said, Felix, when he was the one who trained Che and Fidel and everybody in Mexico. They call him El Korean, Miguel A. Sanchez. They call Koreano because he was in the Korean War with the U.S. Army. So Carlos Prios Sogaraz, who was the former president of Cuba, who Batista deposed, paid him. At the beginning, he was with Fidel before he went to the Sierra Maestra, paid him to go and train Fidel in Mexico because this guy had experience, military experience from Korea. He was the one who trained all of them. Say, Felix, I knew all of them. Che Guevara was nothing. He was nobody in the training camp. Nothing. And then he said, let me tell you one thing. Che will come to me because he knew that I was in Korea. He will ask me several times, you have been in combat, you have killed people. What does it feel like when you shoot somebody, when you shoot your enemy, and you see the blood coming out? He has a fascination to find out what was your feeling when you do that. Back in training in Mexico, well, Koreano. So he had that from inside him all the time. And he loved to give the coup d'etat shot in the head to the people that he killed. We enjoy that.
What was your answer to that? How does it feel to you when you murder?
At the time,
it's
look,
not. It's when you're in war. It's different.
When I arrived, I had a lot of this happened later on, but I knew that he was an assassin. I know he killed a lot of my people, but then it was a transformation. What I had in my mind, against him when I saw him, it's not what I expected. Mm-hmm. I saw a poor guy, a beggar, a guy who was he lost, who was really, really down. You felt sorry as a human being. You feel sorry when you see somebody like that. And really, I forgot everything that he did against my people.
But when you hear the guy who trained Che talk about Che's fascination with killing, with death, how does that compare to your experience with taking people's lives?
Well, I've taken people's life in combat.
Right.
When they're shooting at you and you're shooting at them.
It's completely it's not execution, but it's still
or
taking
torture. I never torture anybody.
Yeah,
a lot of people said in Vietnam, no, our people never torture anybody in
Right.
Vietnam, in front of me. Okay? We got more being nice to them. Like, for example, the guy who gave me the position of Tutang, the guy who was firing the rocket into Saigon. I was friendly with him. He started working with us then, accompanying our units, okay? He really was pissed off at them because they took him being the only male in the family. Look, when I was in the helicopter and we put a strike right on top, he was cheering, like, yeah, you hit the target. She's your friend. You were with them maybe 10 days ago. You were with them down there. It's amazing, the transformation of these people. He was happy that we were killing his friend down there. I couldn't understand that, really. It's amazing. I had some very interesting experience during my career with the agents in different parts, and that was one of them. To see this guy who just came out with them, was supposed to be their brothers in there, and he would enjoy when, yeah, you are on target. You're hitting the right target. You can see, honestly, he was feeling good about that. Maybe he had such a big resentment that they made him do that he didn't want to do, that he expressed it that way.
Did it change you when you first started going into combat, and even in like Vietnam, some of the things you had to do, you know, in firefights, seeing all the death, taking people's lives? How did that affect you personally? Did you become numb to it?
Let me tell you, to be honest with you, I didn't even talk about Che when I was in Vietnam. Che was nothing. It's amazing. People think that was the biggest thing in my career. That was the least thing in my career.
Right.
I feel the hell. I contributed a hell of a lot more in Vietnam. I had much more for filming what happened in Vietnam than in Bolivia. It was only 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours with him in there. That's all. And advising them. It was nothing. He was nobody at that time. So a lot of people ask me, what do you feel when you saw Che? Now, they are thinking in the Che that Cuban created in your image after he died. He seemed the Che that they created in the mind of people, that Superman, you know, that people admire, some people admire and love him, even though he was a criminal. That the Che that I met, when Che was there, was nobody. Nobody knew like him, like Che. Nobody was using his T-shirt or anything like that at that time. He was nobody. He was really a very, very poor guerrilla. He was the worst guerrilla in the world when you look at it. He could not even recruit a single farmer. Benigno used to kid with me and say, Felix, the only guy that we recruited was a dog, and he left because we couldn't provide him with food. Nobody ever joined him. He went from whatever arrived with him, people got killed or people defected from the guerrilla. That was it. But to me, when you look at my career, I always say, look, nobody talked what I really did in Vietnam, all the things. Everybody wants to talk about Che Guevara, and that's the least thing that I consider I did. Right. It was a matter of circumstances to be there where I went through. But Bolivians were the one who captured him. By circumstances, I was there. But it wasn't the highlight of my life, really, to be honest with you, at all. Right. The highlight of my life was Vietnam, when you look at it, really. Where you put accomplishing El Salvadore when I captured Nidia D as the commander.
No, I mean, I guess like what I was getting at was like the amount of blood and the amount of death and suffering that you've seen in your life is more than most people on earth. I mean, it's like the top 1%.
Look, let me tell you the problem I had at home. When I came back at home, my kid, for example, will have some fever. Okay, they had a cold and they had some high fever. I didn't ask about them. And my wife said, you don't love them. I said, no. I have been in hospital all the time. I see kids like them, right, with no eyes, with no legs, with no hands. You know, you're lucky that you have only a cold. You're lucky that you only have a little bit of fever. That's nothing. It really, in a way, insensitizes you. You know, I wasn't that. She was very sensitive when my son had a high fever, or feel bad. I didn't. But I saw so many agony of this little kid, same like my kid, even younger or older, what they have gone through. My kid only had a cold. You cannot. It's no comparison. Mm-hmm. So in a way, it didn't move me to see him with a cold. Yeah, he had a cold. Give him some medicament. He will get rid of it. It's nothing, which was really nothing. Right. Now, perhaps if I hadn't gone through what I did, maybe I would be more worried about them. And she used to tell me, you don't love them. I love them. But you should see the people that I saw in Vietnam. This is nothing. Right. Absolutely nothing.
Is the legend true that you have Che's watch?
No. That's not the way it was. No, I had bought in Miami, long before that, a GMT watch. It's exactly the same to the one that they had. So when I arrived in La Higuera, there was one soldier that had one of the watches. Now, remember, there were about 7 or 8 GMT in there. Every single Cuban Fidel gave a GMT watch. Che and every one of them. Later on, when I got the guys from this guy, I said, look, mi capitan, they go, no, I want to see inside to see if they have any microfilm. So give it to me, I'll give it back to you. My band was different from the original one, because my band, when the original one went bad, I bought one which is not Rolex, but it's stronger. So what I did, I exchanged badges. I gave him my band with my watch, and I took his Rolex with my band. He told me he took it from Che. Bullshit. He didn't take it from Che.
He didn't.
Che had two GMT watches with him, his and the one Cuban who had died, that he was keeping the other Rolex to give it to the family. I got the story directly from them. And then Gary Prado kept both of them because they brought Che to Gary Prado. Okay.
They cut his hands off, right?
Yeah, what was later on. That was Gary Prado, nothing to do with that. That was the day after when they were trying to prove that Fidel indeed was, if Che denied what he wanted to cut his head off. And was the one who told, look, you cannot do that. I said, why not? He said, you're the head of a state. You can show the head of a human being. But what do you suggest? I cut one finger. We had the fingerprint from the Argentinian federal police and they can be checked. So he ordered both hands to be cut. Okay, that was a different story on that.
Okay.
But the watch actually was Gary Prado had both of them, both watches. Now, they told me, and I believe for many, many years, that when they captured Che said, don't shoot, I'm worse to you alive more than dead. That's the story they believe in. I wasn't there. And that's the story that I gave before because that's what I believe it happened. That's what they told me. And that's why then Sergeant Terran told me that when he shot Che, he went into the room, and Che knew he was going to be killed, but I told him. He said, hey, sé que vienes a matar, you're not going to kill. He said, no, we are not going to kill you. You are worse to you more alive than dead. So that I'm repeating what he had said before. Let me check. To repeating what he had said before. It was not the case. I had, about 10 days ago, a newspaper guy that I respect that interviewed the 4 soldiers that actually captured Che. Because Gary Prado was not present when they captured Che. They brought him to him. And he gave me even the picture of the guys, and I got all the documentation he gave me from these 4 guys. These guys were the ones who captured Che. And they claimed that Che was with Simeon Cuba Sarabia. I know that because they both were captured alive. Simeon Cuba Sarabia was another guerrilla like this, very small. He had much more hair and more beard than Che. Was really, really tough, with a lot of hair. And he was executed. As a matter of time, I was photographing the diary. When I hear some burst of fire, I run into the room and look at Che, he look at me. I go to the next room and they had just shot Simeon Cuba Sarabia. He was captured. He didn't have even a bullet. He had not been wounded at all. And what happened was these 2 guys said they were very close and then they jumped on Che, all 4 of them. Che, the only thing Che said, no. My war is not against you, it's against your officers. That's all that Che said. He said, don't shoot, and he didn't say that at all. The only thing they told them, he said, no, my war, mi guerra no es con ustedes, es con sus oficiales. My war is not with you, it's with your officer.
Right.
Now I tell that because I like the truth to be known. But at the beginning I said the other thing because I found hard to believe that Che would say that, really, knowing him. But that's what they said, and I respected that. It was a lie. It was a lie to try to put him down, but he didn't say that.
Going back to the beginning, we glossed over it a little bit, but I wanted to talk about the mission that you went on when they shipped you over to Cuba to assassinate Castro. What was that like when they sent you over there and the mission ultimately failed?
No. That gone through the same with the following way. We were in Panama. We just moved from Guatemala to Panama for additional training. So a friend of mine, Segundo Borja, and myself, we thought to each other, look, why do we volunteer to kill Castro? That would shorten the war tremendously and save lives.
Right.
Yeah, let's do it. So we went to see an American who was in charge of training in there. And we told him, look, we'd like to participate in getting rid of Castro. We'd like to see if it's possible we can shoot them.
Who did you say it to?
He took note. That was it.
Okay.
Never talked to us again. Then we finished the training. They flew us, actually the plane, as if we landed in Guatemala for one night. And then they took us to a home of the owner of the plantation in there for one night. Then we flew back to Miami, and they put us in a motel in Homestead, which is secluded, nothing around. It's just trees all over the place. It's farms all around there. One motel with a big swimming pool, huge swimming pool, where we used to practice with the RB-12, RB-10, the small plastic that we were supposed to use to land. While I was there, I was called and said, okay, your operation has been approved. So they brought a rifle. I believe it was a German rifle. When a telescopic sight was in a box. It was not attached to the rifle. They told me how to attach it. And they told me, once you do it, don't touch it. It's already sighted to the distance you're going to shoot Fidel. They knew that I had no idea where I was going to do it from. But apparently they knew the idea was from Edificio Somayan to the presidential palace. They knew exactly the distance. They have zero in that sight to that thing.
So somebody went there beforehand.
And they gave me, no, they I don't know. How they got it, I have no idea. But they told me it was already pre-sighted to the distance you're going to shoot.
Okay.
The other is speculation on my part. Then segundo, and then they added one more man to our team, a radio operator, was Javier Soto. He just retired. He was a senator for the state of Florida, local, state of Florida, not federal. And he also was, until a year ago, he was the commissioner of Dade County for more 15, 20 years. Okay. He was my radio operator. Segundo were myself. And then in a little box of 10 or 20 bucks, 2 rounds. You only use maybe 1, 2, or 3. If you're lucky, 3. Okay, maybe only 1. You don't use that many when you better do on the first shoot. So they gave us the rifle. Then they took up. We went to the middle of the key. A boat was waiting for us, and then they took to a bigger boat. It was the only time that boat was used for an operation. It was a luxurious yacht from a millionaire. Later on, we were told, we didn't learn then. Later on, it told me that was the boat that belonged to Sergeant Schreifer, a relative of President Kennedy.
Oh, really?
It was a Ukrainian, Romanian crew, and 1 American captain in charge of the plane. It was in late January. We went the first time. We went in. We got right to Varadero Beach. There was supposed to be a boat waiting for us to bring us in and then take us to a safe house and then take us to the area. Okay, we were in the hand of the resistance when we got in there. There was nobody waiting for us, so we came back again. They waited for several, I don't know, days or whatever. Then I think it was in February, we went back again. The second time, in the area where it was supposed to be, because it was a huge boat, but it was a huge boat. It could not be. It was like 100 foot longer, wood, kind of blue, painted blue. Nobody on board. I remember everybody was with the machine gun. We all have Soviet machine gun. All the crew was using Brain machine. They never used an American weapon. It was all Soviet weapon. And there were Ukrainian and Romanian personnel. They call los halcones. It was recruited by the agency from World War II, whatever. Put the lights around the boat. Not a single soul. We came back again. We waited again. Then when we tried to get again, I guess it was in the middle or later part of March, the boat broke. The high speed of the boat went down. So we didn't even go to Cuba. We went back. And then they took the rifle away, say, hey, your operation has been crashed. You are going in as head of the infiltration team for Las Villas. So they added 2 more men to my team. There were 3 of us, there were 5 of us. And then we entered in February 28 as I was head of the infiltration team of Las Villas province in Cuba. Same thing, we went by land. Then there was a guide who walked with him about 4 or 5 kilometers through farms until we got to the main highway. And then a car would pick us up 2 or 3 at a time and take us to a safe house in Havana.
And then what happened?
They never talk again about killing Castro.
They never what?
Talk again about killing Castro.
Before you guys were shipped over there, did you guys do any practice? Didn't you guys have to
No.
you guys didn't have to practice?
I was a good shooter. That's amazing.
Right, but I know you were a good shooter, but didn't you guys have to rehearse where he was going to be?
We were supposed to. They never did that. It's amazing.
You never rehearsed.
That's a lack of professionalism on my part. They didn't know how to shoot. Well, maybe they have the record. Yes, I am a good shooter. I'm an expert shooter. With rifle. They had the record from the. But normally, you're going to do something like that. You familiarize. You shoot with the rifle you're going to use. That's the way it should be done. They didn't. Somebody did the shooting. They allegedly was from target. The only thing you have to do, put the round there, and it's already 0 into it. That's one thing that caught my attention. They should have put me in a range and shoot.
Was it just going to be you, or was there going to be multiple angles? They talk about the triangular hit teams.
No. As far as I know, it's only one person.
Just one shooter.
I didn't. If there was another person, they didn't tell me. I don't think there was. They were talking another one because later on they tried to do it from that location with a bazooka.
A bazooka?
Yeah, and the battery went dead. They couldn't do it. They got the bazooka and everything to shoot at Fidel with the bazooka. And I understand that from the same location, they changed from the rifle to a bazooka, and the battery was down. But when they activated, maybe the guy was afraid of doing it, and they disconnected the battery and said they didn't work. I don't know. I just heard that they tried to do that with bazooka. It didn't work because the battery was dead.
Have you heard the story about when Kennedy got shot? Castro, there was a reporter in the room with Castro meeting with him, and he got Castro, his aide brought him the phone. And he picked up the phone, he listened to it for a minute, he put the phone down, and then he looked at the reporter and said, "They're gonna blame me for this."
No.
Yeah, apparently that's a recount.
I think it was in Brazil when that
happened. Was in that, there was a documentary on Netflix, Cuba Libre. You were a part of that. They interviewed you in there.
Yeah, I think so.
And it was one of the interviews in Cuba Libre with the guy who said that. And you know, the speculation is that Castro, you know, a lot of people like to blame Castro for the Kennedy murder or the Kennedy assassination.
No, Castro was involved, no question about it.
You think he was?
Oh, yeah.
That's the problem. Like, the Kennedy assassination is so convoluted. There's so many theories.
No. There was, and when we know the shooter too, Fabian Escalante. He was a Cuban colonel. Well, he was a captain at the time. He was an expert shooter, spoke fluent English. He was in Dallas that day.
Really?
Fabian Escalante, he left with a private plane to Mexico, then another private plane from there to Cuba.
Really?
Oh, yes. And the United States knew that. And the United States covered up for national security consideration. Because, see, remember, when the October crisis exploded, Cuba already had 4 nuclear weapons inside the island. Okay? They put it in. That's why Khrushchev first so comfortable in bringing 20 of them at a time. Because he said, hey, the Americans know that I bring 4 missiles inside. They have done nothing. They can bring 20. They're not going to mind. And that's when that's when he got to a turning point that they could not accept to bring 20 more. And that's why the Kennedy-Khrushchev treaty was never implemented.
Was the guy, what was his name again? The guy you
Fabian Escalante.
Escalante. Was he a part of the Bay of Pigs at all, or Operation 40?
No. He was when Castro side. He was a captain in Castro's army, and then he became a general.
Okay,
He retired as a general.
And there's a lot of crazy theories. I heard one theory that part of the guys that were a part of the Operation 40, the anti-Castro Cubans, were a part of the assassination team for Kennedy. It was
Believe me.
It's the 3 tramps theory.
Believe me, when you look at the history itself, first of all, you're looking at Oswald. He was one of them. Oswald went to the Cuban embassy first, Soviet Union and the Cuban embassy in Mexico. He spent 4 to 5 hours inside the Cuban embassy before he went back to Dallas. Okay. The Cuban denied he was ever in the Cuban embassy at the beginning. When it happened, they say that it was not true, that he was never the Cuban embassy. As time went by, and they learned that we had pictures, a movie of him going to the embassy, they went back to us because they were questioned by the U.S. administration. I said, oh, yeah, it was a mistake. We went back and we thoroughly went through the record. Yes, Oswald visited the Cuban embassy. He was requesting a visa to go to Cuba, and we denied the visa. Can you imagine going to a Cuban embassy and it will take 5 hours to deny a visa? To deny the visa, to believe me, maybe they will make him wait for 1 hour.
Right.
Okay? You don't delay a visa 5 hours to tell the guy no. And one thing that is for sure, and he knew that, and we knew that, if he doesn't kill, if Kennedy were not killed, Fidel will not be there. I can guarantee you. That's why we started the operation with our teammate, that then the president was assassinated, and that I am convinced that the hand somehow, the guy who killed Bobby Kennedy was also Cuba had to do with it.
Really?
Bobby Kennedy was more obsessed in killing Castro than the president was, both of them. Especially Bobby Kennedy was a very good friend of Harry Bruce Williams. He's one of the that's why he got in contact so close with us. When we were running the operation in Central America, our in between with the CIA was not the CIA personnel. It was Bobby Kennedy, all the time. And when Bobby Kennedy was when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, our team went with a couple of guys from the MRR went to visit Bobby Kennedy to pay the condolence because we were at that time in Central America, an operation that the president had approved. We have boats, we have commando, we got everything in Costa Rica and Nicaragua. And what they told me, they recalled the first thing that Bobby told our team and the group was, my brother had two big enemies, the mafia and Fidel Castro. And I believe it was the last one who assassinated him, Fidel Castro. If Bobby Kennedy was involved in planning the assassination of Fidel Castro when we sent a silencer to Spain to be given to a Cuban mayor to assassinate Fidel. Bobby was well aware of the assassination attempt.
Do you think the U.S. was somehow behind it?
Who?
The U.S., the United States, the military?
No,
Not a chance.
no chance. They have tried to blame.
Who was the guy? I wrote it down. There was a mob guy, Santos
Trafficante.
Trafficante.
Yeah.
Yeah. I heard a
Yeah, he did a lot of Miami. He was in Miami.
Santos Trafficante. Was he involved at all with any of the hit squads that were being trained, the paramilitary hit squads?
Results? No.
Because I heard that he was a part. Because there was
That's bullshit.
That's all bullshit.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was another Cuban here, I forgot his name now, I know he was working with the Cuban intelligence. And he used to swear he worked for the CIA. He was with Alpha 66. He used to claim that he had a meeting with a CIA guy and Oswald in Dallas before the assassination. And the guy that he claimed from the CIA, when I talked to my friend who was the head of operation, he at that time, when Dallas happened, he was assigned in Africa. He was not even here. So this guy knew him, and he swear, he had been on television, he swear that he met Oswald with this guy in Dallas. So I remember when I was, let me see if I can remember his name. It's a Cuban, well known. When they did a series, about 20 people, called Leyendas del Exilio, exile legends, okay? I was the first one. I was the first legend, then the people came behind me. They had him to make I asked him, is this guy going to be interviewed for Legend del Exilio? He said, yes. He goes, don't count me on it. Get somebody else. I'm not interested in being legend. If this guy is going to be among this group, forget it. Do him or don't do it. They took him out of that. Wow. The son of a bitch, he was working for Cuba. Whenever you tell him that Cuba participated in the assassination of Kennedy, he will go crazy. No, Cuba had nothing to do with the assassination of Kennedy. He defended that tremendously.
What is your thought on the moral question of assassinations versus war? Because the way it's supposed to go is the first step is, when it comes to international conflicts, is the first step is diplomacy. The second step is war. And the third step is Title 50, assassinations. But there's a huge moral question with that. A lot of people argue like it would save a lot of lives and a lot of money if number 3, assassination, came before war.
It all depends. All the circumstances are different. Mm-hmm. For example, if people ask me questions about torturing, I don't believe in torture. But there is a point in time. Put yourself, you are a professional interrogator, okay? And you are convinced, beyond any even doubt, that this guy knows where there is an atomic artifact, Washington, D.C., or any big U.S. city. He knows. There is no question about that. You are convinced that he knows that. What will you do or not do to make sure that that thing doesn't explode? Okay. I'll tell you what. In a situation like that, and you are convinced, to me, you can go to an extreme.
Right.
You can take his eyes out. You can kill his mother, his brother, his sister, a baby in the head with an innocent guy in front of him. If he talk, you save 5 million or 4 million people. There is no limit to what you do. Only. But the thing is, the problem with that is that maybe people will use this without being really justified. You can use this, say, well, and really it's not the case. That's the problem in implementing something like that.
Right.
But
It
if
takes a
it's going
special kind of
you're
person.
talking about 5 million people, my friend.
Right.
You're talking about hundreds of babies like that little one. Hundreds, if not thousands, of little kids, mother, father. You're talking about saving. So will you sacrifice? Yes. You have to be true. You definitely have to be convinced. Sure, there is no question in your mind anyway that the guy knew exactly what that thing is.
And this goes back to the Billy Waugh thing when he was in Khartoum and he had many opportunities to shoot and kill bin Laden. Instead, he was taking photos and he could not get the authorization to kill bin Laden. When if he would have killed bin Laden, it would have saved thousands of lives.
But he didn't know that, really.
Right. It's all right. It's all hindsight.
Now we know that we have the people in the tower, but he really don't know that exactly. But if we are really convinced that you got to do it.
Yeah, it all comes down to intelligence.
I forget what the rules are, what the president that you know you're doing. Even if you go to prison, you save millions of people. It's worthwhile. Yes.
There's a documentary out there. I know you're familiar with it, but there's a documentary out there about the DEA agent in Latin America or in Mexico. And there's people that in that documentary, they accuse you of being tied to the murder of the DEA agent. You're familiar with that?
Camarena.
Kiki Camarena. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been aware of that. Yeah.
What is your response to those people?
No. It's absolutely lie. First of all, I can prove where I was during that day, and especially now. I have, since I knew that thing was happening, I was taking notes of the thing that I do every day. Okay? And now more. In 1993, I started writing everything in detail, what I do every day. So you tell me that I did something 1995, September 4, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I can tell you exactly where I was, who I met, what I did I eat, everything. When Kiki Camarena, when they claim the day I was supposed to be killing Kiki Camarena, I have a phone call with the White House. That's when they called me that day to tell me that General Gorman wanted to talk to me, and they gave me a phone number to call General Gorman in Panama. That day I had a meeting with Perry Rifkin, the director of immigration here in Miami, with Pedro Reboredo, the mayor of the city of West Miami. Because we had 3 Nicaraguan Contra fighters who have been very badly wounded. One called El Tigrito. He had a bullet through his face here. All the thing was hanging down. He destroyed his mandibular and half of his tongue, everything. And the other 2 were paralyzed. And we were able to get through a friend of mine, the hospital of Recarey on Cuban, which is now, I guess he owes a lot to IRS. He's hiding in Spain, I believe. He was going to allow his hospital to attend these people for free. Okay. Now, these people had no documentation to travel. They have no passport. So I got the lieutenant colonel from the Honduran intelligence service to issue a document, like that identity document with their picture, height, altitude, weight, and all of this shit in detail. And then I went with Pedro Reboredo to see Peter Rifkin, the director of immigration, to see if we're allowed to get in that paper, which is not a passport, a humanitarian visa. So I have the record, they record with the White House, me talking to the White House that day, and then talking to all of these people, going to immigration, there's a record immigration that I was that day.
What country were you in? What country were you in? What country were you in that day?
Miami. Here.
Oh, you were in Miami.
No, we were talking to Peter Rifkin, director of immigration here in Miami. And Pedro Reboredo was the mayor of the city of West Miami.
Oh, okay.
We both went to see the director of immigration here, and he agreed. He agreed to get the visa, and we brought the 3 kids here, finally. We got the 3 kids to fly into the United States by Challenger. I know and then the second day was supposed to be in Mexico also. I am at the airport picking up with Reboredo at the door of the plane, the Challenger, the 3 wounded people to take it to the hospital.
Oh, wow.
So I have more than a record. Now, another thing, they used the name Max Gomez. In that month, in 1985, I didn't know Max Gomez 60. I didn't have that name at all. 3 months later, when I went to fly to El Salvador, my friend Lou Rodriguez, Lieutenant Colonel, when I got there, said, Felix, you have to use another name here, not your true name, when you come to fly as a volunteer here. I am going to give you the name of Maximo Gomez. Maximo Gomez was a Dominican sergeant in the army in Dominica who became not a generalissimo in the Cuban War of Independence. He was Dominican. And he said Dominican who flew for the freedom of Cuba, you are a Cuban flying for the freedom of El Salvador. So I'm going to give you the number of Max Gomez. So when I supposedly was in Mexico using Max Gomez, nobody knew that name. The name didn't exist at that time. Right. It came up 2 or 3 months later when I went to El Salvador.
Do you think it's possible there was a CIA agent there during the torture at Kiki? No. Bullshit.
What the guy is saying is that what they claim this guy Berreyes is one of the I have the copy of because I called the DA people. And I contacted the guy from the DA and said, look, let me send you what the DA put out the same day that this guy started telling that they were the one CIA involved in Kiki Camarena. Mm-hmm. The name was David Wilson. David Wilson was not recently. When they came out with this thing on Amazon Prime, they had The Last Narc. They dedicated the 4th chapter to me. When that thing happened, this guy, David Wilson, was the director of the retiree for DEA, which is not called DEA retiree. They're called Association of Federal Former Narcotics Agents. That's the signal for the retiree from the DEA. That day, he put a paper, I have a copy of it, to all the DEA retirees, saying they had no idea why these 2 agents were lying about. They didn't help. First of all, the Berreyes claimed that he was in charge of Kiki Camarena. He was never in charge of Kiki Camarena's death investigation at all. And they didn't know why they were lying, because that will hurt the real guy who did it, who was Caro Quintero. And Caro Quintero did it because he confiscated a huge farm in Mexico that was producing him like $1 billion in money every year. And that he got so pissed off at Kiki Camarena, then he actually kidnapped Kiki Camarena and then tortured him, killing him. At the beginning, this asshole said that they had a movie of me doing that.
And a video of you.
Yeah, video and recording.
Right.
I said, show it.
They said it was classified, right?
Then they didn't talk anymore about the video. Then they talk about the recording. They could not present it because it's not true. I was not even in Mexico during that time. And at least of all, the agency, they claimed that the CIA was involved because the CIA had an agreement with these people from the cartel to allow the drug to come into the United States, and they were receiving money for the Contras.
Right.
And they claimed that the Contras were trained in una finca Veracruz, they call it, Yucatán, finca Veracruz, creo que se llamaba, that the Contras were trained there. There is not one single Contra ever trained in Mexico. Ask them to produce one Contra that said that he was trained in Mexico. It was all lie. Not a single Contra. All the Contra were ever trained was in Honduras.
How do you think your name got mixed up into all of it? Just because you were involved with the Contra?
No. Well, first of all, you got Kerry, got me involved in narco trafficking.
Right.
Okay, which isn't true, even though he apologized afterward. The Cuban government have been saying that for a long time, that I'm a torturer and assassin. Now I appear in the list of the most wanted people from Cuba. Fortunately, Interpol will not take that at the value. Mm-hmm. They have 40 people, they just put it out 10 days ago. Big list accusing all of us of being terrorists. My name is in it. There's Ninosca Perez Castellon, the newspaper lady from here, also her name appeared in there. Basulto from Boy to Rescue, his name appeared in there. All of us are terrorists for them. Cuba have accused me of everything except one thing. They have never accused me of being a queer. But other than that, every single thing in the book they are throwing at me, except that.
Well, you're doing good on that front, I guess.
Yeah.
Felix, thank you so much for doing this. It's an honor to talk to you. Your life has been a movie, to say the least. Is there anything else we can say? Do you have like a website, or do you have a book people can find that you've written, or is there anything people can do to contact you if they want to talk to you? Or
No, if anyone talk to me, talk to you, and you tell me.
well, Felix, thanks again. I'm really grateful
Pleasure.
for your time today, and that's all, folks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Felix.